Attention tribe! Ready to take charge of your future in the trucking industry? Join us for CMC Live, powered by Let's Truck and Nastic at the Mid-America Trucking Show, March 26th and 27th in Louisville, Kentucky. Led by Kevin Rutherford, CMC Live delivers actionable insights and real-world solutions designed to help you transform your business. From cutting-edge strategies to hands-on advice, this is the event that puts you in the driver's seat of success. Don't miss this life-changing experience. Be there. Be unstoppable. CMC Live, March 26th and 27th at the Mid-America Trucking Show in Louisville, Kentucky. Register now at truckingshow.com.
Your money, your taxes, your truck, and your road to success in the trucking industry. This is Trucking Business and Beyond, the show that puts the money where it belongs, back in your pocket.
Good morning, you beautiful bunch of Fockers, and welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. It is Tuesday, December 17th, and it's time for the Power Hour. We'll take all of your maintenance-related calls. We'll help you troubleshoot whatever you've got going on. All you have to do is pick up the phone and join us, or hit that Call Now button on your app. The number is 855-950-3835. Got the team here from Pittsburgh Power to help me out. Looks like we've got Bruce, Eric, and maybe Leroy. He might still be sleeping. We'll hear from them, and then we'll get to your calls and questions. So go ahead and line them up. Bruce, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin.
What's on your mind this week?
Well, I'm in a retirement community here in Florida, and you never know who you're going to meet. And my understanding, in my building there is a retired Chrysler engineer, and he has a car in one of my parking places, but I don't need it until January the 8th. I need to find this fellow to let him know that. And I heard he walks with a walker, and he's kind of hunched over, and I see this tall fella going across the parking lot the other evening on a walker, and he's got a brace from his heel, from the bottom of his foot up his heel, up like to at the back of his calf muscle. And I thought, that's the guy from Chrysler. So his name's supposed to be Chuck.
Okay.
I walk up behind him and I said, Chuck from Chrysler. Guy keeps walking. I walk around in front of him. I said, Chuck from Chrysler? He said, no, I'm Art from Holly Carburetor.
Really?
And I said,
how crazy is that?
You got to be kidding
No
me.
way.
And I said, were you an engineer there? He said, I was a mechanical engineer. I said, do you know about power valves and metering bodies? He said, I know everything about that.
Wow.
And the guy just came to life.
I'll bet.
We stood there and talked about 15 minutes, and we could have gone on, but the bugs were starting to bite. But it's just kind of neat. So I kind of know where he lives, and I'm going to go find him and sit and talk with him about Holly carburetors. And he told me that whenever fuel injection came out, he was 36 years with Holly, retired in 1999. And when fuel injection came out, it kind of really hurt them because the majority of their business was OEM, and the hot rod section was just a small piece. And then Borg Warner bought it, and he said, but the fuel injection is what ended that. But again, you never know who you're going to see, right?
Well, what a crazy coincidence that you're looking for somebody that you have something in common with, the Chrysler guy, and you think it's him, and yet you meet somebody that you even have more in common with, or you'd be more interested in, and that was just a crazy coincidence.
Yeah. And the Chrysler guy, though, I'm anxious to meet him because he'll know Troy Simonson, who was the engineer responsible for getting the Cummins engine in the Dodge pickup truck.
Ah, okay. That's
And Troy and I became very, very good friends.
Yeah.
And we've since lost him. He's passed away, but he's a good guy. And when Jeep got involved, they didn't like the way Troy did business, because Troy would talk to people like me and final consumers to see what they like and what they don't like about the current truck. And upper management felt that one of the engineers, the lead engineer, shouldn't be doing that. And he said, how else am I going to find out what people like?
Yeah.
Pretty simple, right?
Yeah. Seems like it.
Mm-hmm. So, got a call yesterday from one of Shauna Gray's clients. He's got a PACCAR engine, 500 horsepower. It's got 279 gears, 12-speed Eaton auto shift, but he didn't know the gears, the ratios of 10, 11, and 12. I'm assuming that it would be a single over, like a 0.85. He's in the process of getting with Eaton now to find out. But he hauls windmill blades. He's 90,000 pounds, and he likes to run 70 to 75 mile per hour. I didn't think those people did that with those blades.
Well, you shouldn't.
But
no
turbo.
Forget
no
fuel
turbo
mileage. But all right, go ahead. I won't go off on that.
Yeah, no turbo boost gauge, so I can't determine. He wants to change the gearing, but his mechanic told him to go to 308s, and I said, well, from 279 to 308s, I'm not sure that's what you want to do. We talk, and he does listen to the show, so he's probably listening now. He said, I don't really understand this running in direct, so I was explaining it to him, and maybe someday we need to talk more about it. But if you wanted to run, say, 70 mile per hour with I think the truck's a 20 or 21 PACCAR, low pro 22.5s, what gear do you think you would want?
Say that again. Do we want to be running indirect? Is that the point here?
That's what I'm trying to talk him into running indirect. He doesn't quite understand the benefits of it, so I was explaining it.
This is a lot like the other things that are changing. It's almost like we have 3 different generations of trucks that we have to talk about now. Maybe even 4 if we really got a little crazy. Mechanical engines, we're going to spec one way. We can set those aside. You guys do a lot of that. I don't get many calls on the show, hardly ever, but we know we would spec those way differently than anything else. Then we move into electronic engines when the reason, Bruce, we have to go back to the reason why we wanted to run indirect. You know, we try to get the RPM where we wanted indirect, and we did that because those drivetrains were inefficient outside of direct. Once you went to overdrive, the dual counter shafts, all the oil churn, we lost about 3% of fuel economy. So we wanted to stay in direct, not to lose that fuel economy. But then we were hamstringed because we didn't have the gears and the transmissions to be able to run 75 miles an hour in direct. And some people want to do that. For me, this was easy because I never wanted to run those kind of speeds. Direct always worked for me because I don't need to go faster. But once people started going faster, there just was not a drivetrain that would let you do it in direct. And once you went to overdrive, we lost some efficiencies. Today's transmissions, not so much the Eaton yet, but the Volvo, these aren't dual counter shaft. They don't lose much more than about 1% by going into overdrive. And that's why we're now speccing the truck to be able to run in underdrive at highway speeds, direct at highway speeds, and overdrive at highway speeds. And that gives us an efficient gear for 55 to 75 mile an hour cruise speeds. And we're not losing that efficiency anymore in overdrive. So the one thing we have to determine is, do we have an efficient transmission and we can just ignore direct? Direct isn't enough of an advantage anymore that we have to be indirect. But if we still have an old dual countershaft transmission, then maybe it does make more sense to try to stay indirect. But you're not going to be able to do that with his 75 miles an hour.
Well, I was looking at the 247.
We got
247 at 65 is 1375 RPM.
At which speed?
At 65. I don't have it higher than that.
And
let me find.
Well, let's just
my
stop right
spec on
there
the
for a second,
253.
because here's what we're going to run into. You are nowhere near getting him a good gear for 75 miles an hour there. Not indirect, because you're going to be 14, almost 1500, and we're starting to push some problems onto the bottom with the startability with his 90,000 pounds. 247s and those transmissions just don't have low enough gears. That's the other reason that 14-speed I-shift is like the ideal transmission. We have 2 creeper gears, a really low reverse, and we can run it in 3 top gears at highway speed. It's the transmission that's always held us back, Bruce. You and I would have been doing this way different, even with the early emission engines, had we had better driveline choices. We just didn't. There just wasn't the transmissions we needed to do this, but they're there now. So I don't see how you keep this guy in direct, given that he's 90,000 pounds and he wants to go 75 miles an hour.
Well, that said he's willing to do 70 or possibly slightly less. Now, if we do a 253 gear at 70 mile per hour, he's at 1540 RPM. So
yeah,
that could also work.
Yeah.
All right.
Here's the one thing I would absolutely tell him not to do. Don't go spend thousands of dollars to go to 308. This is not going to accomplish much of anything.
Right. That's the problem with mechanics that don't understand gearing get involved. So
yeah, that's just a.
So then I had another.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Another interesting phone call today, or yesterday, from Alberta, Canada. Young man, 34 years old, that has 160 acres and raises buffalo and hauls buffalo. And he said those things can run 35 miles per hour. I was surprised at that.
Yeah, they can.
And he said they get there fast.
Yes.
So,
hey, Bruce, there's a whole.
We were talking. Yes.
There's like a sport watching tourists try to run away from these things in Yellowstone. Happens every year. There's always videos. People think they can get close to these things, and then once in a while, one of these will charge, and you watch how fast it happens. Like the people that are kind of trying to creep up close to them, by the time the bison hits them, they haven't even reacted yet. It's so fast. And forget, even if you know they're coming, you're not going to outrun one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he called and he said, "Are you still doing 444 fuel pumps and injectors?" And I said, "We sure are."
Wow.
He said, "Well, years ago you did it for my father, and wow, did that 444 run?" I said, "Well, the same guy's still doing them."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, I just lost the N14 in my 95 9, and I picked up a 1210 CPL, which was the best of the 444s." He said, "Now I'm going to send you the pump and the injectors and tell me what else I need to do to it." And I want it to run like it did for my father. And so we started talking, and I said, "Do you have children?" He said, "Yes." I said, "How old?" He said, "I have a 3-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl." I said, "Do you ever take them in the truck?" Oh, first of all, he's 4th generation owner operator.
Wow.
I said, "How old were you when you first went in a semi truck?" He said, "I was still in diapers."
Yep.
I said, "Oh, so I said, you were hooked from the beginning then?" He said, "Oh yeah, there's always been a truck in my life." And so his 3-year-old boy, he's got strut stacks. His lane is a half a mile long. You can't see the highway from his house. But he uses the Jake brake slowing down to get to his driveway. Well, his 3-year-old hears that and has to run up the grade yard about 250 feet to get to the garage where Dad pulls into, and he's standing there waiting for Dad.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, he's anyhow. So he sent me a picture of the W9 in the garage. I sent it to you on Messenger just a few minutes ago. This 3-year-old with his cowboy boots and his blue jeans and flannel shirt and his curly blonde hair, sitting up on the Vortex air filter.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, now that is neat.
Good stuff.
So, like that keeps us going.
That's right. All right, what else you got, Bruce?
And then I got one other thing.
All right.
And this is about life and not about trucking.
Okay.
It's called Okay, Not Okay. So, did you ever hear this? Okay, not okay?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't be able to finish what you're talking about, but it sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay. So if you're okay, let's say you're dressed nice, got a beautiful truck, you pull in to deliver a load, pick up a load, you walk up onto the freight dock, and the shipper sees you, and he's actually a little bit jealous. He hates his job. He's there in one place. He knows you're going to pick up this freight or deliver, and you're going to be gone down the highway again, and he's very envious of what you do. So he's not okay, and he sees that you're okay. You got a smile on your face. So he wants to make you not okay, and that way he feels okay.
Yeah.
So I had this happen the other day. A short, overweight lady that was not attractive at all got in my face about not having my dog on a leash, and wow, she just wouldn't let up and kept coming after me. And then she asked me, "Are you licensed to carry?" I said, "What difference does it make?" "Well, I'm from Detroit, and you know all about that." I said, "Well, I used to work at Cobo Hall, and I worked for International Show Car Association out of St. Clair Shores. But what's that have to do with this?"
Yeah, with anything.
And then her husband come running over. "You got to calm down. I mean, I was kind of irate. Basically, if you recall, last Tuesday, I didn't talk at the beginning of the show.
Right.
I was still tripping on adrenaline.
Oh yeah.
This lady had me tripping.
You were.
So
that was
I
a
was
good thing.
very, very quiet.
That's a good thing. That's a good time to just take a deep breath and say, I'm just gonna get out of that mode. Bruce, you know what? I didn't think that's what was coming here, but now that you say that, there's a much, much bigger picture here. And I we'd have to put on our stainless steel helmets but there are forces at work. We could say the deep state, whatever it is, that work very hard to pit us against each other. And you can see it across our society now. They've succeeded. They have made every single thing we talk about political, and then they've divided us politically. We're to the point where we're not listening to each other anymore. We just scream our talking points. We fight about everything as though it's political when it's not. It's just part of our life. But politics has taken over our lives, and they want us divided. You can go into all kinds of conspiracy theories about why, but for the most part, once you divide people, they're very easy to control. And that's really what's going on here. In fact, my first topic today, I keep saying, I wish I didn't have to talk so much about politics. I wish our government was smaller, but I have to talk about it because it affects everything I help people with. The government has lots of control over your money and how you can invest it, and it's ridiculous. We got to get around crazy tax codes. So money is very political. Business, we're so overregulated. Business is always going to be political. But now our food has become political. Bruce, I've made the statement, I can almost look at somebody's plate and tell you what their politics are. We've been divided. The left is into veganism and eating bugs. That's their thing. And the right is all moving carnivore or keto. I mean, we're dividing ourselves by food now. Here's another one. I don't doubt that we've ever talked about it on the show. I don't talk about it much, but once in a while. Do you watch the series Yellowstone?
You know, I've watched it a couple times. There's just too much fighting and too much profanity for me in there.
There's a lot of that. I don't watch, you know what? I keep saying I don't watch a lot of TV, but lately I watch more TV than I ever have in my life. But it's more documentary kind of stuff and some reality TV that, you know, I'd learn things from. That tends to be what I watch. I don't watch movies but for whatever reason, Yellowstone probably, and I'm not a good critic because I don't watch a lot of this stuff. Yellowstone might be like one of the favorite things I've watched on TV for entertainment. I don't know what you call it, a movie, a series. It's a series that's been going on. I thought it was fantastic. But this has been a very political show. Bruce, this is one of the most of the themes of the show were very conservative, right wing. John Dutton, all the good characters are conservative, right wing. They're ranchers. The funny storyline I thought was hilarious when John Dutton was sleeping with the Greenpeace chick that, you know, he arrested and put in jail. But they would go back and forth, and you could clearly see they were making fun of her. It's a very conservative show. It has been from the start, which was shocking because Hollywood doesn't put out much stuff like that. Well, at the end, I thought the ending was really good. It's hard to end a series like this. I'll kind of explain what happened. But a bunch of conservative people came out and they're just crying and I knew it was going to be a woke show. Look, they ended it. It's so woke. No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. And in the end, the whole point of the series is that there are big hedge funds that are buying up these kinds of ranches in Montana and in that area and turning them into ski resorts and condos. And they do it by forcing higher taxes on the properties. Then the ranch can't pay the taxes, and then they have to sell. Or when somebody dies, Bruce, are you aware that when you die, if you are wealthy, you have to be really wealthy for this because it's into the millions of dollars. But at a certain point, the number changes all the time. Whatever your estate is worth, once it goes over the threshold, and let's say it's $5 million, there was a time when it was only $1 million. After that, the government gets a 50% tax on the rest of the value. If this ranch in this Yellowstone ranch, let's say it was worth $30 million, might even be worth more than that. It was 700,000 or 800,000 acres. If it's worth $30 million and let's say 10 is the threshold, then there's 20 million left. The government gets a $10 million check.
Incredible.
That is criminal. There is no way that should ever happen. One of my first business partners, when I started to get into financial planning, sold really crazy expensive insurance policies to rich people. I mean, crazy expensive policies. A rich person might go spend $10 million to buy a $20 million policy or $20 million to buy a $20 million policy. The reason being, then the value of the estate is gone. You spent all the money on the insurance policy, but when the person dies, you get the $20 million back and it's tax-free. Because life insurance is not taxable, but if that value is still in the estate, it is taxable at 50%. So insurance companies sell these crazy policies to cover this. Well, in the movie, they came up with a really good storyline. Unfortunately, it's not true. It couldn't happen the way it happened in the movie, or in the show, but it looked really good. What they did was when John Dutton was killed, instead of trying to pay the inheritance tax, which they never would have been able to do, they sold the entire ranch to the Native Americans to make it part of the reservation, and they sold it for like $1 or $1.50 an acre. Well, and they made it look like they got around the inheritance tax by doing that, but it doesn't work that way. The inheritance tax kicked in the minute the guy died, and you have to pay the inheritance tax on the value that day. So if it then, a week later they try to sell the property, all you did was get $1 million, but you owe the government 10, so now you're really screwed. But it made a good storyline. But because of that, because they basically gave the land back to the Native Americans and screwed the capitalists, which in this case, they need to be screwed. I don't like to see this kind of stuff either. They called it woke. That's how political we're making everything now. Can't even talk about a TV show without bringing politics into it. But they did this on purpose. They want us fighting like this.
Interesting.
Here's another crazy one
So
that's in the news right now. Have you seen this drone issue?
Oh gosh.
So here's why this one's
interesting. I've seen it.
Yeah, here's why this one's
every
interesting.
Night I see it.
I have not read one single line about what's going on with this. I haven't followed this story at all. And it's interesting for me not knowing. I haven't watched any of the videos. I haven't read anything about it. I know what's going on. You can't be alive and not know what's going on. But I haven't read about it. So I'm just kind of sitting back watching everybody's reaction. Do you know where we are on this now? We are at a point where I have seen the president talk about it. I've seen Trump talk about it. I've seen military people talk about it. I've seen governors talk about it. And they're all trying to describe or figure out why these drones are there. What are they doing? And they're talking about this over and over and over. And yet there's another group of people that say there are no drones. These are just airplanes and stars. You guys are idiots. Can't you? Which one is it? How could we not even agree on whether there are drones there or not?
An airplane goes lateral. A drone just flies all over the place, so it's pretty easy to determine which is a drone. And they say some of them are the size of refrigerators. Well, I think the people that are the great hunters, like Eric, if one's over your house or close to your house, you should just take a few shots at it in the middle of the night and bring it down and see what it is.
Hey, Bruce, you know why I wouldn't do that in today's world? That's our first reaction a lot of times, and it seems reasonable. You know why I wouldn't do it? There are people still in prison over January 6th. As long as this administration is in office, I would be very careful about doing stuff like that. And that's a shame that we have to be that afraid of our own government. But look at what they've done to people over vaccines and other things. With this administration, I would be a little careful of that. But again, I don't even know what they are. I haven't thought about it. I just know what's going on. And I sat back and watched everybody else's reactions without knowing what the story was really about. And I'm just shocked that we're at the point. I also watched the CEO of a company that makes military drones. And I verified. I checked the guy's name. I checked the company. It was a legitimate video from the CEO. And he said, look, I'm going to explain this the best way I can. I don't know why they're there, but I'll tell you the capabilities of these drones and what they're normally used for, and then you decide. And he said, flying drones at night is insane. You can't see anything. If you fly them up at a high altitude, you're fine. But when you start coming down low, you're going to run into power lines and trees. You can't see to fly them at night. He said it's really difficult, especially these big, complex drones. He said, so we very, very seldom ever fly these things at night at low altitudes around neighborhoods like this. He said you can't see anything anyway unless you have infrared, and most of these don't. He said what they can do down at that level is we can outfit them with sensors to detect certain things. We can detect gas leaks. There's all kinds of commercial uses to bring them down that low to sniff things out. And he said that the reason to do it at night is maybe because you're trying to hide something. He said it makes it more difficult, but that would be a use of a commercial drone like this in the dark. You're sniffing things out with sensors. Then he went into this story. This is where it gets a little weird. He knows another military contractor. Supposedly there was some shipment coming back from Ukraine, and there's a nuclear weapon in there, and it's lost. And he's speculating that they're actually searching for the nuclear weapon, and they can sniff it out with sensors. Now, that got a little crazy to me. That sounds bizarre.
So drones are harder to see in the daytime because there's no lights.
Right.
So at nighttime, they're very easy to see. Friends of mine that fly drones, when they take them, they're there. But is it Andrews Air Force Base? It's our largest Air Force base, and yet the sky around Andrews is covered with these drones. This is ridiculous.
Everything about this story.
That's why I say you bring a couple of them down. You bring a couple down and see what they are.
Yeah, everything about this story is so bizarre. And now we're to the point where no matter what the government tells us at this point, we're not going to believe them. Or half the people will believe them and half won't, because whatever story they tell, whatever your bias is, if they tell you a story that aligns with your bias, you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. But if you're on the other side, you're going to go, oh, that's insane. That's not happening. That's what they've done to us. Mm-hmm. Every topic now comes down to this. And it was on purpose. One more real quick, kind of has to do with transportation too. Trump came out and said he's going to look at eliminating the post office. I've been saying for years this should have been done. It's horribly inefficient. It loses incredible amounts of money. Most of the mail being moved is just junk these days. There's much better alternatives. And so now that's the big divide. People are fighting about whether we should have a post office or not. And I've seen a lot of posts like this. Why would we get rid of the post office? I can ship a package from Key West, Florida to Anchorage, Alaska for $10 and UPS charges me $50. Yeah, I get that. My business benefits from that tremendously. We do most of our shipping with the post office simply because of the cheap rates. But in reality, Bruce, think about what we're doing. We're taking our tax money and subsidizing business shipping. And I'm taking advantage of it. As long as the rule's there, I'm going to take advantage of it. I would rather see us change the rule. This is a stupid system that we take taxpayers' dollars and subsidize business shipping. The only way the post office can do it for $10 and UPS has to charge $50 is because they lose money at everything they do and we subsidize it.
Interesting. I've said for years we only need mail, being most of it's junk mail. We only need it twice a week.
There's another idea. Yeah, there's another idea. Now, just cut way back.
The packages could be different, but going around to house, if you did it on Monday and you did it on Thursday, that would be sufficient.
That's another good idea. Just cut way back on the scale. But I think then also, since this is a taxpayer subsidized entity, the post office has to get out of the business of commercial shipping packages. We should not be using our tax dollars to subsidize business shipping.
Like the railroad.
Yeah, we should just stop doing that. So we'll see. Like I said, I like to talk about current events. So, and I have so many, all of my shows now are a topic. We're full. I can't get any more guests on. I'm booked up everywhere. I don't have any more time to do shows. I like to talk about current events. People are saying, all you ever talk about is politics. No, I'm trying to talk about current events, just stuff going on in our world, except everything has become political now.
Okay. I'm going to add one thing.
All right.
So they want to sell off a nickel on a dollar, the border wall.
Oh,
And now they're saying it's rusty, it's junk. Chances are it's Corten steel, so it rusts itself as it paints itself.
Bruce, stop there for just a second. This stuff is designed to be outside. It's either laying there in a pile or we put it up as a wall. What's the difference?
Well, that's exactly what I was saying to Debbie last night. I said, look how nice it's laid. It's got 4x4s between it. Air can pass through it. It's in the desert, so it's not junk. But the liberal news is saying that it's junk. It's not junk because it would normally be vertical. Right now, it's horizontal.
Exactly. It's
so
meant to be
what's
outside.
the difference?
Right.
Anyway, so back to my last thing. If you feel good and somebody's getting in your face for something stupid, that means they're trying to make you not okay. Just let them go on for a minute or two, and then look and say, "Do you feel better now?"
If
you feel better, I'm happy that you feel better. And that way you're still in control.
Yep.
Okay.
That's great advice.
And so I have to think about that at times, So
Bruce, there's another
last Tuesday I did not.
There's another analogy for this, and I see this a lot in the owner-operator world. There's a story, you can shorten it up though. Take a bucket of crabs, and one of the crabs will start to figure out a way to climb up and gets to the edge of the bucket and is about ready to drop out to freedom, and the other crabs all reach up and drag him back in. That's kind of what we see in society. If you start to climb too far ahead of your peer group, they will try to drag you back down to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of idea. All right.
Right.
Let's go ahead, Bruce. You have something else?
Now we have our local Home Depot here. There's a hot dog stand right outside. They have Italian sausage, and so I was really hungry. It was 4:00. Bentley was with me, and I was leaving, and the smell is all through the parking lot.
That's right.
And I said, "When 20 minutes, I'll be home, and I can get something." I gave in. I pulled right up to it, and the window was down, and Bentley, the little puppy's with me, and he's going wild now. He's got his legs out of the door, so I had to let him out. So the girl inside's a young girl, and she has her door open. Well, he goes right in and puts his paws right up on her counter, and he's looking at her. He got a free hot dog.
Well,
he got a free $5 hot dog.
Bruce, he's so darn cute. How could you not give him a hot dog? Come on.
Yeah, he got a free hot dog.
That's awesome.
When we come home, Debbie said he doesn't want to eat. Did you have a hot dog? She said. I said, no, I didn't have a hot dog. I had a hot sausage. Bentley had a hot dog. These dogs.
I know.
Anyway, there's two ladies inside Home Depot here, and they both have in their aprons that they wear. They both have treats, dog treats.
Yeah.
So he knows where they are, and he goes right for them.
That's right.
And even after we're gone for 6 months, the first time we go in Home Depot, he's going right for those two ladies. So.
All right, good stuff.
All right.
Let's hear from Eric. And has Leroy shown up?
Yep. Yeah, Leroy is here.
All right. What do you guys got this morning?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about was actually shooting drones. You probably shouldn't do that. The FAA is actually illegal. So it might be a felony. I probably wouldn't, unless you had like a crossbow or something.
Yeah. It's like I said, I don't know any of the details about the story. This one was more fun to just sit back and watch how everybody else is reacting without knowing any of the details at all.
Yeah, they're going crazy. The internet's blowing up.
And how we could be so divided as one group is trying to figure out why they're there and another group is saying they're not even there.
Yeah, it's crazy. But, The other thing I have is a bunch of truck-related stuff.
All right.
We have a very interesting truck here that we don't see too often this happen. A gentleman brought up, let me pull it up here. It's a 99 Peterbilt with a 379 model. And he has a Detroit Series 6. And the gentleman has been driving this truck for a while. We were actually on a phone call with him, a conference call. He didn't even know he had a boost gauge in the truck. Or was it a pyro? Was it a pyro? No, it was boost gauge.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. So
I work here.
That's right.
I think.
We're talking to the guy on the phone, and we're telling him, it was a boost gauge. That's what it was. And we said, it hit 28 pounds of boost. He said, well, I don't even know because I don't have a boost gauge. And the tech that was running it on the dyno, yeah, he does. It's right up to the left. Like, this guy's been driving it for 6 years. Didn't even know that he had a boost gauge and didn't even pay attention to it either. So we do some work on it. It came in for low boost and low power. So we checked it. There was no boost. There was a couple little boost leaks, but nothing major. Went through, checked like fuel pressure, fuel restriction, air in the fuel. Didn't find anything definitive. So we're looking through different stuff. We decided turbo. Brian actually came up with this one. He said, let's pull the turbine housing off. Look at the exhaust wheel. The exhaust wheel was actually pretty much gone. Like, this guy driving it with such a hot setup for 6 years like this, it literally chewed the fins off the turbine wheel. It basically melted them or disintegrated them, or however you want to put it. So we put our 34 turbo on it, and it immediately picked up boost power, and it was a way overshot on the dyno. The thing made like 800 and some flywheel horsepower. With one of our tunes, we'd cut it back a little bit. But just something that you really wouldn't think of. It wouldn't be my first go-to, like, oh, it's a turbine wheel.
Well,
you always look for like boost leaks or maybe overfueling or maybe like a parameter in ECM that wasn't set right. This one had a hot tune in it from somebody else, and had 100% fudge factor, which is really, really hot. This is stuff that.
Eric, Bruce, you guys have been doing this a long time. How many times have you ever seen a case of something like this?
Well, I wanted to say, Eric, that turbine wheel is stylite, the same as exhaust valves, and they can run cherry red. So usually it's a piece of valve guide or something came through the engine that wipes out the turbine wheel instead of melting the blades off. But I'm not there to see it. So are you sure it wasn't a foreign object?
Not that we know of. We don't have the full history of the truck. He bought it 6 years ago and has been driving it ever since. And I don't believe he's ever changed a cylinder head or anything has gone through it. But they work like fractured brakes. It did look like I didn't see any damage to the fins themselves, but the tips were like broke off. So it definitely could have been something foreign coming through there too.
If you could text me a picture of it or email me a picture, I'd like to see that. But I have talked to a lot of people over the years that have a boost gauge and really didn't know it and didn't know what it meant.
So after experiencing driving my C13 with when I told Leroy, just give me all the power you can give me, just for the fun of it, we decided to do that. First trip down the road, I blew my entire charger cooler apart. I had boost leaks everywhere. We spent a week putting it all back together. And then when I left again, I can't imagine driving a truck like that without a boost gauge. So the one thing I will say about this driver, if he made it 6 years and didn't tear a whole bunch of stuff apart with driving this thing without a boost gauge, he's a hell of a driver on his own. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, seriously. Without the boost gauge, he must be doing a hell of a job of driving this truck. You could tear up a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you absolutely can if you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
So I'm gonna say this. Whenever we get a phone call and the person doesn't listen to this show, they don't go on our website, They're not mechanically inclined. And it's sometimes pretty shocking how little they know, yet they're going up and down the highway.
Yeah.
They haven't been to a CMC. So it's rather difficult whenever you're starting out with someone like that and they say, what can you do for me? And yet they don't have a clue of what you're trying to explain to them. So those that do listen to the show, you can really help the new people and help your friends that don't listen to them. Get this app and just listen to what Kevin has to say and what's going on the show, and go and listen to some of the older shows and go onto the website and read the articles, because it makes our life much easier.
Yeah, Bruce, just about all of us on the call go back to the day when I don't know what the number is, but if I had to guess, when I started, it seemed to me like everybody I knew that was a single truck owner operator. That was kind of my group. Those are the people I were with all the time. That's what I was for a little bit before I started adding trucks. I would say about 90% of the people I dealt with that owned a truck either grew up in a trucking family or a farming family or both. I don't know if 90% is the right number, but it certainly seemed like it. So almost everybody had that same basic knowledge of equipment and engines. And so you just didn't see a lot of this where somebody could actually be driving a truck like this and not understand that they had a boost gauge and what it does. You just didn't experience that.
Well, you get guys that think they have a direct drive transmission and they're running 355 gears.
Well,
a lot of people, it's getting better now, but how many people called? I have a single over 13 with 355 gears. No, you don't.
Right.
So,
right.
Let's take the CPL. Look how many people don't know on a Cummins engine. They don't know their CPL. I'm surprised on the show here how many people call and they know what series of ISX or X15 they have now.
Yeah.
And that's really good. It's nice for people to know that.
Absolutely. All right, Eric, anything else?
Yeah, we got some older stuff here. We have an older DDEC 2 engine in our shop that we're converting over to a DDEC 4, a platform of electronics. Years ago, you used to be able to call Detroit and ask them for a kit, and they would actually sell you an entire conversion kit. And it would include the ECM, the wiring harnesses, the sensors, even down to brackets, nuts, and bolts and everything. Now, we never did one of those kits, but we always knew that they were out there. Well, they discontinued them. You can't buy them anymore. So we're actually converting this over, I guess, more the efficient way, I guess you could put it. But there's a lot of stuff that people don't know as far as the programming. Like, you can't just throw that on there and expect it to fire up. There are some other stuff that needs to be done, and we're finishing up one here today. And then we have another one in here. It's a 99 Freightliner. The guy just bought it. And we were doing our Hawkeye report, and Adam found that the spindles on all 4 drive axles really have a lot of excessive wear and pitting, and just they look really, really bad. So we called our local axle doctor and give us an estimate. The prices on that is really shocking. So when you guys are doing your walk-arounds and trips and stuff, or even your yearly inspections, really, really look at those wheel bearings, hub seals, anything associated with that spindle. Take a good look at it, because those things are really expensive to get repaired now. I have a couple.
Eric, if somebody's not familiar with how to inspect those properly and what they're looking for, is that something that would be taken care of on a Hawkeye report?
Absolutely. Our Hawkeye report is basically for that. And I do have customers that actually come to us, once or twice a year just to get a Hawkeye. When they pull the truck in the shop, we do a boost test and check the codes. And then it's either Adam or one of our other techs back there that will go over the whole truck from top to bottom, left to right, front to back. And you get a detailed list of everything that he can find. And Adam is very, very meticulous and very, very good at finding those things. Stuff that I'll walk by a million times and never catch. Adam can be across the shop and say, "Hey, did you see that?" No, what are you talking about? Like he just has like that sixth sense. Like he's like the truck whisperer or something. He can find that stuff. I got it. And it's frustrating sometimes because I'll actually be looking for things that that are wrong or broken or missing, and he like nonchalantly just walking by. Hey, that's gone. That's wrong. That's upside down. He's a man, dude.
Well, he's
really good at that.
Here's what I would say about this. I'm pretty good at that kind of stuff too, and I actually enjoy it. I mean, I sometimes enjoy that kind of work more than just knowing something's broken, taking a part off and putting it back on and fixing it. I like to look around. I like to that same kind of approach. But I tell you this: when I had my trucks, had I had a relationship with, I'm going to say Pittsburgh Power specifically, because I haven't really found other shops that offer programs like this, and even if they do, it's nobody really pays attention to it. It's just some idea they came up with. And even though I could have done this myself, I would have had all of my trucks scheduled on the calendar just twice a year. Take it over there, let them do it. So much faster, they're better. I would not have done this myself once I got up to multiple trucks. This would have been something I just would have put on the calendar for all of my trucks.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But there's more to that. Every person, regardless of what profession they're in or what level of education they have, has their strong points.
Right. Good point.
And I knew a fellow that was raised in a strip mine family, and he quit school in the 8th grade, and the teachers would call to him and ask him questions. He said, that has nothing to do with what I'm going to do. He said, but I could look at the hillside and I can tell you how far we have to go down before we hit the coal vein. And he was always right.
Yeah.
And so that's one of Adam's skills, and we all have had our own skills, and
Bruce,
my skill is.
We had a good example of this last night. We were just talking about dogs. Diesel, for some reason, for the last week or so, he'll just be sitting there and he'll just whine a little bit, like he needs something, and he never does that. So I'd give him attention and he'd stop, or I'd give him a treat and he'd stop. And I think, well, that's odd. He's never done this before. And it kept getting worse. So yesterday, Lisa said, do you think he's in pain? And I said, I thought that too. So I spent some time. I went all over his body. I was feeling, I was squeezing, I was moving his joints, trying to see if I could get a reaction if he was in pain. And I spent a lot of time doing it. And I think Lisa did too. We couldn't figure anything out. He wasn't reacting to anything. At the vet, as the vet walked into the room, he realized what was wrong. Hadn't touched the dog. The Diesel he could visually see that he was holding his mouth slightly different, and he knew it was a dental issue. And it was. He had an abscessed tooth, and it was filling up his glands under his neck, and that's what it was. But the doctor recognized it walking in the room. Lisa and I had been all over. We didn't figure that out at all. And all he had to do was look, and he saw it. And he was right.
That was a good vet. And,
yeah.
And the vet he's in a profession where he should be.
Right.
And we have a lot of people in the trucking industry that own trucks, and they should own trucks because they're really good at what they do. And just ride with some of them. There was a video I'd showing a guy with a 2-sticker, and they said the smoothest shifter there was. I tell you, I've ridden with so many owner-operators that are so smooth with that shifter, and they're not even thinking about it because you're talking to them about other things,
right.
and they're good. They're just really good. And what's amazing about a lot of owner-operators is the way we can carry on conversations when they're going down a highway, and sometimes messages and messengers are coming across the computer when they're going down the highway. So they're really good at multitasking.
Yeah, we won't get into that. All right. Leroy.
Hey, I did ask a question to an owner operator. I needed to clean off some aluminum that was down in the salt water, and said get muriatic acid and me exactly how to do it and how to use it. And it's the first time I've ever used muriatic acid. Boy, when you put that on aluminum, within seconds, it's smoking. And
yeah, that'll clean it.
So anytime I have questions, I just ask owner operators, and I usually get the answer.
There you go.
So
there you go. Eric.
That's how I found my Kenworth, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was a Friday afternoon. I started telling every owner operator I spoke to what I was looking for. And Monday morning, one calls me and says, "I found your truck. It's in Kansas City, single axle and all, VIT bunk, the same CPL that I wanted in the big cam, and everything was right there." I mean, it happened that fast, from Friday afternoon to Monday morning.
Yeah. Wow. All right, Eric. Anything else?
Just the transmission one, but I think Leroy's
Sure.
going to talk about it.
Okay.
I was not.
Okay.
You go for it.
You know more about it than I do. I'll let Leroy talk.
All right.
I'll let Eric talk.
Oh boy, we got lots of calls, so we can always go to them.
If we want to just get the calls, that's fine with me.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll start off.
What about the knock sensor?
Oh, hold on. Knock sensor?
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking this morning, like when people call us and say, "Hey, I have a code for a knock sensor. What could it be?" Take a guess on how many different things it could be. Leroy actually told me this morning. I was amazed. How many different variables do you think it can be for just a code for a knock sensor?
I don't even want to try to guess because I know I'll end up sounding stupid.
Well, take a guess. You won't sound stupid.
38.
Hey, you're pretty close.
Yeah,
See?
actually, you were way closer than me. I said
Oh, really?
13.
So if somebody just says, "I have a knock sensor code," I mean, roughly, I just roughly counted. I wasn't 100% specific, but it's about 46 different codes that it
close.
could be.
All right.
Now, you can narrow
Wow.
that down if you give me inlet or outlet. That narrows it down to about 23. So 20 to 25 different fault codes that it could be. So it can be a little bit difficult when somebody says, "I have a knock sensor code," and I'm trying to help them because I don't know. It could be one of 46 different things. Now, probably 90% of those are just the knock sensor is bad, but I mean, there are instances where it's not. And that doesn't really even count all the quote knock sensor codes that are actually other things like SDR codes or something. So it was just one of those things where I get that call a lot. I mean, it's no fault of the driver because that's all the dash says.
Right.
But it's incredibly difficult to help when it's like, well, I mean, it could be a lot of different things.
Yeah. Well, we could tie this back to what we were just talking about, what Bruce was just talking about. We've talked about in the past. Bruce, you said no matter what occupation you're in, people have different strengths within that occupation. Two really good technicians might have two totally different, strengths. And the one we talk about that's so important today and hard to find is finding really good troubleshooters. And in order to be a really good troubleshooter, you have to have two sets of skills. You have to know a good troubleshooting process, and then you have to know enough about what you're trying to troubleshoot. You can be a really good troubleshooter, but if you don't know anything about the details, you're never going to be able to fix it. And if you know all the details about the equipment, but you don't have a good troubleshooting process, you will probably eventually get it fixed, but you're going to take a lot more time than what was necessary. So having that skill, and Leroy, that's kind of what you were just explaining. So first step is, here's the knock sensor. How many things could cause this? And you kind of look through them all, and then you start to prioritize them, right? Which one do we see most often? And this is where just pure experience can come in. If you've been working on this thing for 20 years, you've probably seen all of them, and you know which one is the most common, and then you just start working through that tree, right? But that's a skill.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think for me, experience plays a lot in it. I know I'm fairly young, but I've been doing this for a while now, and it's one of those things where I feel like sometimes I get a little complacent in my troubleshooting because I've just seen the same thing so many times that I'm not really going through the process every single time because, like you said, 9 out of 10 times it's X, what's wrong with it? So you just jump there.
Right. And let's talk about that
So,
experience level for a second, Leroy, because here's something that Pittsburgh Power does very differently than almost everybody else. You are pretty young. How did you get this much experience so fast? And I'll tell you, because this is all you do all day long. You're not changing starters. You're not breaking down tires. And how common is that in our industry? It's just we have technicians. We expect them to work on air conditioning and electrical and all of this stuff. You are able to get 10 times more experience on this one item because it's what you work on all day long.
Yeah, that's a 100% fair point.
Yeah.
So if I was driving a new truck down the highway and I got a code for the knock sensor, I would think I'm pulling to the dealership and I'm going to buy a knock sensor and I'm going to put it on there and my problem's going to be fixed. And now you're just telling me there's 46 reasons, other things that would set a knock sensor off. So you go and you spend a couple $100 for the knock sensor and put it on and you still get the same code, knock sensor. And so then you think, well, the knock sensor is bad, so you take it back and you get another one. You still have knock sensor. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm shocked at that. I'm really shocked. You blew me away on that one.
Yeah, there are roughly 46 different codes. There's not necessarily 46 different things it could be. That list might actually even be bigger because if you have a knock sensor code, it could just be the wiring to it.
Right.
And then like if you have a drifted high or drifted low code, is it the sensor or is it something else? Like it kind of snowballs and gets a lot bigger. So yeah, it's just the devil's in the details in that one. And we see that all the time where people replace the same sensor over and over again. Then they end up getting it actually looked at, and then they find out it's not the sensor at all.
Wow.
All right. Good stuff. Now we will go to some phone calls because they're starting to pile up on us. Let's start north of the border. Mateus, welcome.
Hello. You were talking about transmissions in the beginning. I wanted to share a bit of my experience. So the truck I built, 13-speed 308s. What I could find, the idea was just direct 55 miles an hour, give or take. That's what I want to run. Works perfect. If I want to go faster, I can go up a gear. The problem is I run heavy, I run the mountains, and it just does not work. So what's happening is it's really nice in the flats. When I'm not pulling, I'm in direct all the time. We're doing good. As soon as I hit the mountains, and I must say, I went to an 18-speed yet after just to get the lower startability and low reverse gears. What happens on heavy pulls, the jump between the gears is too high. So when I pull a hill and I split half a gear, it's not quite enough. Like if I'm 1400 RPM, I want to downshift. By the time I'm back into gear, I'm right back at 1400. I didn't gain anything. A drop in the whole gear, now we're jumping so much, I'm right up against the RPM limiter. So now the truck won't take throttle for a few seconds before it starts going again, which it's workable if there's if you're doing an odd hill here or there. If you're constantly in the mountains on the poles, it becomes a real nuisance to have these bigger RPM jumps between the gears. So that's just if somebody's considering doing those kind of setups, that's kind of a bit of a downside for some operations.
So let me ask you a question. You're running 308s and you want to run in direct. What speed are you trying to run?
Well, 308 direct, I'm like right at 55, 56 miles an hour where I'd want to be.
Okay. What engine?
It's a C12, got Gear 2 in it, by the way. It's beautiful too.
Okay.
That engine was at 390 horse at 1,400 foot-pounds of torque before, absolutely useless. We're at 475 and 1850 torque, I believe, right now. It's a pleasure to drive.
Do you have our manifold and turbo on that C12?
Got your turbo, don't have your manifold.
Okay. All right. So at 55 mile per hour, low pro 22.5?
No, 11R. Tall.
Okay. So tall 22.5.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in direct gear, so you were either in 11th or 16th, correct?
That would be 16th now with the 18 speed, yes, sir.
Okay. And what's your RPM in 16th gear at 55 mile an hour with that tire?
About 1475.
And your weight?
Usually sitting about 95,000 most of the time.
95, okay. 6 axles?
Yes, sir.
And what's the turbo boost on the level, wind not blowing at 55 mile an hour?
On the level, somewhere between 5 and 10 usually.
5 to 10.
Yep.
Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. No, this thing is, after the tune, yeah, she's going up to 36, 37 on a heavy pull. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Was that 19 before the tune? It would have never gone over 19 before. So, but yeah,
I've never, of all the years we've worked with C12s, I've never got a phone call saying that a person broke one, and we've set many of them up to 550 horsepower.
Bruce,
Carl Kellner's C12 with the power box on power level 5 was, I think, 729 horsepower. So it's a phenomenal engine.
I would make the
I
claim.
should say little around Kevin. So.
Yeah, well, I know. I was just about to make the claim, Bruce, that had we focused more on this engine, and we should have, this may be the most underappreciated, underused engine in the over-the-road market. I think this could have been a phenomenal engine had we just focused on it more and built more of them.
Yeah. Well, we worked with everyone that called us.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like I said, I never understand why we call a C12 a small engine, but we don't call a Series 60 a small engine. They're the same size.
Yeah.
One we
as
treat.
far as drivability,
Kevin, we used to call them small until we worked with them.
Well,
We
see,
thought
there
they
you
were
go.
small engines.
That's what I mean. Once you
and I thought it was a small, lightweight engine the first time I saw a cutaway version. And then until 2003, when we started working with them, then we realized the capability of that engine. So,
yeah, that's what I mean. I think it was very underappreciated and underused.
Yeah.
No,
so I think you're getting, because you're going 50. I think you're getting away with the 308s because of the 55 mile per hour.
Yeah, no, it's okay in the flat. It's just once I hit any kind of hills and pulls, it doesn't shift right. I'm just always in the wrong spot. It's either jumping too many RPMs or not enough. So I bought another truck with 391s. I'm just going to put 391s in again, and just whatever I gain in the level. Whatever I gain in the level with the 308s, I'm just losing it twice over in the mountain. So it's kind of it's a toss-up.
Well, wait a second. If you're running along in direct gear and you come to the mountain, if you're in 16th, why don't you go to 15th and then 14th? And 14th is another. You're out of the overdrive box. So why aren't you just using it that way?
No, see, I'm talking real hills that I'm pulling. So again, what happens is I can either drop a whole gear, but by the time I'm down to 1350 RPM, I want to drop a whole gear because of that bigger jump in the RPM. So like whole gear, like I'm saying, 2 full gears. Right? I'm not splitting. Now I'm running at like 1950 RPM, which the engine doesn't even take throttle at it. So it throttles out at 1900 RPM. So now I'm losing till eventually it's taking throttle again. If I just go down 1 gear, as in just split down, I'm not gaining anything. If I'm at 1350 RPM, but I split down. By the time I'm back in gear, I'm at 1350, 1400
So,
RPM, and it's still not pulling. So it's kind of a ugly.
Let me ask you a question. You say you're going to put 391s. Did I hear you say 391s back in? Have you run this truck, this exact truck, not another one like it? Have you run this truck with 391s before?
No.
I don't think
that one's always at 308. It had 463s when I bought it.
I don't think you're going to see the improvements you think you're going to see. I mean, we're not creating anything new. All we're doing is shifting what gear you're going to fall into the same RPM range and end up with the same stuff. We can make your gearing right now, depending on what gear we put the transmission in, we can make it exactly what it is with the 391s. You're just going to be in a different gear.
Yeah.
You're not creating.
I get that, but the problem is that the jumps from one gear to the next. Like if I'm pulling a hill, I'm at whatever 15 miles an hour, and I'm shifting, and the jumps are either too big or too small between the gears I got right now. So if I'm going to the 390s, now I'm going to be able to drop like 2 gears down, so go from whatever 8 down to 6, and just keep pulling right away instead of waiting for 3 seconds before it takes throttle again because my RPM is still high.
What's
just a drivability thing.
What's the percentage of times you're in the mountains versus on the level?
30-40%.
So let's think about something you just said. And I'm going to bring it back to money because I always do. 30 or 40% of the time we're only so 60 or 70% of the time this isn't even an issue. When it is an issue, you're telling me each shift you might have to wait 3 seconds longer. We're going to spend thousands, and I know you've got the gears, you're doing it yourself. That does make a big difference. But I just don't. You're never going to pay for this. There's not going to be any kind of fuel mileage increase that's going to pay for this. This is just
I'm not
your preference.
Yeah.
And you know what? When they're your trucks, you have the parts, you can do all this stuff. Knock yourself out. The truck should be the way you want it.
But he is right. It's less RPM between.
Correct. Right.
That's like when a guy takes out 355s and put in 264s. He loves it because when he's starting out and going, he's in the gear longer, so he's shifting less. And so this gentleman's situation is different. 40% of the time he's in the mountains and he's got a bigger gap between gears. So call us after you put the 390s in it. Call us and let us know what you think.
I certainly will do that. So. All right.
Okay. And also, you're between 5 and 10 pound of boost on the level. Let's see. Now you're going to run an 18th gear on the level. Let's see where the boost goes to, and that way we'll know. Okay.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see. So, hey, another quick one. Air compressors. Within the last 3 months, I'm on air compressor number 5. The first 4 were all bad rebuilds. We got everything.
Has he got a new torsional damper on the crank?
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, that's all been done. They were all pumping oil. So I had one. I was doing a lot of work on the engine a year ago and had the 25-year-old compressor off. It was working good. I just replaced it because it was old. It ran for 40,000 miles. It started pumping oil. And that was one that was locally rebuilt with, later they admitted, Chinese aftermarket parts. So it was pumping oil. They gave me another one. The new one was immediately pumping oil. Checked out all the other air compressor stuff that could cause compressors to act up. Everything was good on new lines. I put separate air filters on the compressor just to rule out all the little things that could cause the air compressor to go bad. Totally isolated it. Got another one. Same thing again, pumping oil. They gave me my money back. I went to Caterpillar, spent triple the money, got a Caterpillar original compressor rebuilt by Bendix. Doing the same thing again. Replaced it one more time with a second Caterpillar compressor, and we finally got a compressor that's not pumping oil.
Wow.
That's just quality of parts.
Wow.
I was not impressed. Yeah, every time I came home from a trip, replacing air compressor again. I can do it blind already. So
interesting.
Yeah. And
Sorry to hear
one
that.
other little thing on Yeah, well, it's part of the game, but it's kind of frustrating.
Because if that happened to us, we'd be charging a person. We'd be losing a ton of labor changing air compressors. And even though we wouldn't be charged for, we would lose all those hours of labor if that happened to us.
No, that'd be pretty expensive. Well, for me, it's downtime to run around and get the parts and all. It's still worth a lot of money.
Absolutely.
The other thing, speaking of compressor, that after the tune, so before the C12 was only putting out like 19 pounds of boost, and the compressor is getting the air from the intake manifold, so it's getting pressurized air from the turbo. So after the tune, compressor was getting a lot more air shoved to it. So if I was on the pole and the compressor was in a charging cycle, it was always blowing out of the safety valve on the compressor, because that C12 doesn't have a reed valve or anything to regulate the pressure that's going in. So I had to go on a separate air filter for that air compressor to alleviate that problem. But took me a while to figure that out. Every now and then I pulled a hill, and I got this weird air and coughing, air rushing sound, and I could never figure out what that was.
So let me ask you this: what about the ACERT cats they're running the Bednick's Westinghouse air compressor, and some of them are at 60 pound of boost? We're not hearing that complaint.
I think that they have a reed valve in it, if I call that correct. There's some kind of valve in there. My Series 60 has something in the line as well to apparently reduce that pressure. So that's what Caterpillar told me. It's not a major issue. It just took me a while to figure that out. And yeah, because Bendix has a max amount of air that you can shove into that compressor. So, and I think they on the engines that have higher boosted, there's some sort of valve in between to limit that somewhat.
I never heard of that. No.
Yeah.
Taken a lot of stock trucks over the years, and they gave them a lot of power, and never had that issue. So.
Yeah. No, I got that solved. So it took a bit to figure out, but other than that, so it's a nice engine. I'll keep it going. So.
Okay.
All right, I'll let you know once we get the 390s in here.
Good stuff. All right.
Please do.
Hey, Jerry in Yakima, how'd you get in here?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a hacker, and I just worked my way in.
Did you find some secret back door? I looked up and I went to drop one call and pick up another, and I'm like, where did that call come from? You've just been sitting there waiting.
I think I heard it beep as soon as you started in on calls, and then you went, oh, no, wait a second, and you got to talking about something else, and then you brought in your last call. So I think what it was.
So you're blaming it on me now?
No. He's in Yakima, Washington. Who else do you have there, Kevin? Aaron let him in.
Aaron's not in Yakima.
Yes, he is.
No, he's not.
Where does he live? I thought he lived in Yakima.
That would be like me saying Pittsburgh Power's in Sharon.
I thought he lived in Yakima.
No, he lives in the Tri-Cities. Richland, Kennewick, Pasco. Yeah, he lives in Pasco.
I see. Okay.
You can't tell the difference.
I thought maybe he had an inside connection through Aaron.
Oh no, I did. Oh, now we lost him. Now the call's gone. I think he is right. I think I did it. I think I brought the call in, and then somebody said something, and we got back to talking about things, and I forgot he was there, and then I brought another call in. But now that we had him and we were getting ready to talk to him, he is gone. So hopefully he calls back, and we'll go to Wyoming instead. Mike, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. What's on your mind?
Oh, not much. Hey, I don't know if you remember me. I was the guy that was having the ACM fault and couldn't figure it out. And I called on the Tuesday, and I called in on a Friday talking to Joel. But I finally figured it out, and I just wanted to give you guys an update because I was asking a bunch of questions about it. but it ended up being a chassis harness. So, so if anybody ever runs into that problem with where they have a bunch of weird faults, and I ended up taking it to a Volvo dealership up in Billings, Montana, and they ran through it, and they were having a heck of a time figuring it out too. And the mechanic told me, he goes, I'm not 100% positive, but I think this is probably it, just because the harness and some of the connectors were, basically crumbling apart. And so he's like, I recommend changing the harness, and ultimately that fixed it. It was quite an expensive bill, but I guess it's worth it if it gets fixed. So
how much was the bill?
Well, the wiring harness alone was $1,600, and they had 12 hours of labor into it. And I want to say they fixed some other parts to it. There was some other issues that they fixed while they were there. But I want to say it was $4,400 for the chassis harness and labor. Overall, it was $5,800 because while it was in there, I had them do some other stuff.
Yeah.
But I talked to my mechanics and they were glad that I took it to Volvo and had them do it to replace the harness, because they were like, we wouldn't want to touch it, and they would have charged a lot more than that. So, because I guess they're a nightmare. So, but anyways, yeah. So now I just need to, now that I got all the bugs worked out of this, I'm out in Wyoming, but I'm thinking of probably next year going out to you guys and doing a diesel force clean and possibly a tune for a Volvo. I don't know if I would benefit of having your guys' tune on this thing or not, but I mean, I'm happy with the performance. I'm usually more for fuel economy than performance, but I don't know. You guys have tunes for these Volvos?
What year Volvo do you have?
It's a 2015.
2015 Volvo. We can tune that, right, Leroy?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Sounds good. Well, I just wanted to give you guys the update on it. So,
all right.
If anybody else is listening, and another thing onto what you were talking about with the knock sensors, another funny interesting thing, and I see it on Facebook. Everybody's posting poor def quality and then regen required, and a lot of these guys think that their def fluid is bad. That's what it's saying is their def fluid, and 99% of the time that's not the case. It's poor def quality is not really the quality of the def fluid, but the inefficient SCR catalyst. That's what's going on. But I don't know how many times I see people saying it was like, check your def fluid and make sure it's the right, like it's good, and that's not really the issue. 99% of the time, it's usually. Yeah, it's just funny. It's like I try to make comments on them, but then and tell them it's like, yeah, that's most likely not your def fluid.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, so just to throw that out there. So.
Yeah, got it.
But,
hey, we could make a comparison. How often do you guys see trucks in the shop where the fuel quality was what caused the problem? It's got to be pretty rare.
Yeah, it's not very. Yeah, it is very rare.
It would have to be really rare. I doubt that DEF is going to be any different. I know it's a different liquid, but the supply moves quickly. These fuels or DEF deteriorate over time. If they sit, they will deteriorate. But none of this stuff should be sitting. It's all moving through the system pretty quick. So we would, if we had a DEF quality program, it would have affected a lot of trucks. And that just doesn't really ever seem to happen. So I would venture to say that even with DEF, the problem being the DEF itself would be pretty rare. It wouldn't be something you would put up high on the troubleshooting tree. Because it could be the problem, but it's not very likely to be the problem.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with that code is just why they named it that way.
Right.
I mean, that's just like,
right.
It could be bad def quality, but it's like a number of other things like the guy was saying. I just don't know why they named it that way.
Yeah, that is confusing. Let's. I think we got Jerry back. Jerry, you're messing with me today. What's going on?
As soon as I started talking, I went to no signal. I'm like, crap.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we got you back. What's on your mind?
So I just had a real quick question around regen topics. This will probably be a really easy one. I'd run across this before. I've got a 22 Freightliner that's got OptiIdle, and I run it overnight. So the engine turns on and off. In the morning, sometimes I'll get the dashboard generation. So my question is do I need to do a parked registration before, or can I get on the road with that notification and being on the road, it will complete its regeneration cycle while I'm driving?
So I think I got most of that. Basically, after idling for a while, you get some sort of message and you're unsure whether to do a parked regen or just drive it, right?
So it happens overnight. The engine will turn on and off overnight, and so in the morning, I notice that there's a dashboard indication that I need to do regeneration. And should I do a parked regeneration before I get on the road, or should I just get on the road and it'll take care of itself?
To me, that just depends on what getting on the road means. If you're gonna get on the road, you're already under load, and you know the exhaust is gonna get nice and warm going down the highway or whatever, then yeah, I'm okay with just getting up and just getting going. But if you have like a long day of urban driving or stop and go, then I would probably do a parked one.
Okay, so if I'm getting out on the freeway, then I just don't want it to as I'm shut down the engine if I don't do a regeneration. So now I've got to find some place to park and do a regeneration. So that's kind of where if I get on the freeway, then go ahead and don't worry about it. It'll take care of itself.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, I probably really wouldn't worry about it much at all. I mean, stop and go isn't going to help the situation anyway, but I don't think I don't know. I probably wouldn't worry about it that much unless there was a lot of idle time overnight. But if you're doing optimized idle, it's only running, maybe 2 hours all night long in total. I'm not sure, but
right.
Yeah,
I read a CPAP, so it actually will probably 3 or 4 hours because it comes on and off. I'll say quite a bit. I don't know. But
yeah, I think it's likely just good to go. I probably wouldn't worry about it too much if it's me.
Okay. All right. And Kevin, the bison, you were talking about the bisons earlier that running into people.
Yeah.
There are groups on a bunch of different social media platforms called Turons, combination of tourists and morons. Turons that of Yellowstone and of others where they post pictures of these idiots that are like trying to take selfies with a bison. That is just
it happens a
wrong
lot
on so many levels.
Right. And when you watch these videos, you do realize how quick they are. Holy cow, it's incredible.
They really are.
Watch, man.
And they are not into selfies.
No, they're not. And what typically happens is the people are close enough. The bison makes one lunge, ducks its head, and flips them like 30 feet in the air. It's right. I mean, that's what happens.
Right.
Yeah. They're not slow.
Turons. Yeah.
They're not slow, dumb, lumbering animals. They are extremely powerful, fast, agile. It's pretty incredible when you see them.
They really are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Good talking to you. Let's go to Alberta. Ben, welcome.
Morning, Kevin. Long time no talk.
Hey, Ben, you're going to have to come to your phone. I hear a bunch of wind noise and some voice way in the background.
Can you hear me now?
That's a little better. Try that.
Yeah. So I have a question. I have an older Pfizer differentials in 18 speed and older 18 speed with the 3406 cat, and the front differential is on the way out, and I was gonna replace them with Meritor's, but the guy I'm getting the diff from is trying to this is a 373 ratio. And the guy that I'm getting the diffs from is trying to tell me that the 390s would be a better option for me. And I'm wondering what you guys think.
Well, hey,
what
Ben.
You drive, Ben. What speed?
Ben, hold on a second, Bruce. Hey, Ben.
Yeah.
Did you ask him my favorite question? Because I would love to know when somebody gives you advice, especially when they give you advice and you go, I'm not really sure if that's right. Did you ask him why he thought 390s would be a better option for you?
All he was saying was it's more of a common ratio. And then I told him my opinion, and he said, why do 90% of the trucks on the road have the 390s then? That's what his answer is.
Well, wait a minute, Ben. Ben, was he claiming? Did I hear that right? He claimed that 90% of the trucks on the road have 390s?
No, he was just saying that 90% of the trucks on the road have the more common gears. But
stop. I'm trying to get to where he was going with this. It's more common. You know, in today's world, it's more common to be obese than it is to be a nice, healthy weight. Just because something's common, in fact, if I hear something's common, my first thought, it's wrong. Most people do most things wrong. I mean, seriously, look around the world and that rule will hold true. So when something is common, I'm probably running the other way. I've said many times, I consider myself a contrarian in almost everything. A contrarian in investing, a contrarian in business. I do the opposite of what the crowd is doing. That's one thing. That his justification is just ignorant. But the next one, when he says this is a common gear and 90% of the trucks have these common gears, he might be correct if this was 1972, but this a 390 is one of the most rare gears on the road today.
But another thing was, he did ask me which transmission I have and which engine. That's why he was recommending the 390. He said,
but he's still wrong. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Maybe I missed something. Hold on.
I'm calling to get your opinion.
Hold on. Maybe I missed something in this conversation. Did you tell us this was a mechanical engine?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. I missed that completely. So
I thought I said it right at the beginning, but maybe not.
You may have. When I brought you on, I was playing around with one of my other calls, setting it up, and maybe I just missed that. I apologize. That ran, but much of what I said still applies.
Well, no, wait a second. Wait a second. Then what speed?
Hey, Bruce, you broke up right when you said it.
What speed do you drive?
60 to 65, anywhere.
And are you on 24.5 tall rubber?
Yes.
Okay. So that 390 would be equivalent to a 355. And you're a single over 13?
Single over 18.
Single over 18. Okay, that's transmission I had.
Yeah.
It's I believe it's a the wreck year is in 17th, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. So a 390 would be equivalent to a 355, and you're going 62 miles an hour. What gear do you have in it right now?
373.
370.
And
all right.
the most weight we haul with it.
At 62 mile an hour, what's your RPM? Come on, Ben, you need to know that. I know, I've known you a long time.
Yeah, I'm not in the truck right now. It's 1,500.
1,500 at 62.
No, 60. 1,500 at 60.
Wait, say that again. You broke up.
1,500 at 60.
60 mile an hour.
1,500 at 60. Is the engine stock?
Yes. Yes, everything's stock. 25
shame on
pounds
you.
of boost.
Yeah, 25 pounds not stock in a B. 20 is. So you're up a little bit. Okay. You're up at least another 100 horsepower. Do you like the way it pulls at 1,500?
Yes, I do.
Are you
Pulls very good,
are you mostly in level terrain?
No, not even close. Lots of hills around here. Lots of
hills. Okay.
Very gravel road hills that we pull at 110,000 pounds, anywhere from 100 to 110 gross.
Well, the 390 certainly wouldn't hurt you because of your tire size.
And then 373 also would be the kind of the same.
I mean, you're going to gain probably instead of being at 1,500, you get 1,550 or 1,560.
Yeah. I was just going to get your guys' opinion on it and see.
Yeah, you got to always keep in mind that tire size. Those older trucks like that.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we do pull a lot of long grades loaded.
How many axles are you?
At slow speeds, very slow, like 40, 30 mile an hour.
Okay.
Because it's gravel roads, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Bruce, there's a great example of what I was trying to talk about earlier. I missed one sentence and was so far off track because we're all the way back to mechanical engines. And that's what I said. We're still dealing with this once in a while. You guys deal with it way more than I do. I don't get a lot of calls like this, but you missed that one detail. Like I said, there's 3, almost 4 generations of trucks that change not just the advice, but why we do it differently. And I have to really pay attention or I'll end up, just being way off.
You got emotionally involved, Kevin. Just say you got emotionally involved, right?
I did. I know. I know.
You were getting okayed on Ben. I happen to know. I knew what he drove.
Yeah, I totally.
I've known this guy a long time, even though I've never met him. So.
I think the emotion
before this was the guy that had the Mac. Remember?
Yeah.
He screwed up exhaust system.
That's right.
This is the same guy.
That's right. So the emotion kicked in when I heard the statement 390s are the most common gear. I just kind of lost my mind. I'm like, what did he just say?
Well, you got
yeah.
Yeah. Well, wait, he didn't say the gravel roads. He didn't say 30, 35 miles an hour. And so we're assuming he's on interstate. And then the 110,000 pounds came out. And so that changes things.
Yeah. All right. I'm not sure what happened. We have a bunch of calls.
Now I got to sell my Now I got to sell my turbo and get them to turn that thing up, make it a man's truck.
There you go. There you go. All right. We've got some call. I'm not sure what happened. We had calls on the board that were screened. They seem to be gone. We've got a bunch in the queue. Angie's screening one right now. So we will get to it in just a second.
I do have to leave at 1 o'clock today. So I've got 20 more minutes.
Oh, there we go. We got a call. So we'll grab it. Let's go to Oklahoma. Jerry, welcome.
Holy cow, that was quick. Now I got to put my spoonful of pumpkin spice nut butter down so I can talk on the phone.
Well, I was just sitting here waiting for the call to get screened, so I grabbed it right away. And
oh wow,
I'm a little worried about. I'm a little worried about you and your nut butter habit. Are you in control of this?
It's addicting.
I know.
No, I'm definitely not. If you talk to Angie sometime about my orders, I can't even. Hell, if I need a breath mint, I'll have 5 jars of nut butter coming too. It's just a standing order. Hell, no matter what I order, I just got to get about 10 jars of 5 jars of each flavor of the nut butter. So it's definitely out of control. But I really don't want an intervention. I enjoy it too much.
Right.
So
good deal.
So I've got a question. I need to set this up for Leroy. But I got to tell Kevin something pretty funny first. It had to do with Eric. Eric had about the best line of anybody I can think of anyway. I talked to him about a month or 6 weeks ago after I bought this truck. It's a 2023 Freightliner Cascadia with a DD15 and a DT12 transmission. So since I hate technology, as you know, Kevin, I was talking to Eric and I asked him a question about that. And I told him about something. Well, you got to remember that I absolutely hate technology. And he just blurted out, he says, well, what the hell do you buy a Cascadia for then? They're the most complicated truck on the road.
You should be in an A-model Kenworth. You should be in an A-model
you're right.
That's right.
Well, after this deal, I'm about ready to go back anyway. So, Leroy, here's the deal is I bought this truck and I had a VIN number. And I talked several times to Henry, and he explained how you could go on the Freightliner app and you could put in your VIN number and you could watch some training videos on the automated transmission features, et cetera, et cetera. So after I bought the truck and had a VIN number, it was probably 2 to 3 weeks before I could get shook loose and actually go pick up the truck. So I watched a lot of those videos, so I kind of knew what it was supposed to have in there. After I actually got the truck, about 90% of the stuff they talked about in those training videos wasn't available to the driver. So I made an appointment with Freightliner to go in there and turn all that stuff back on again. So the first trip to Freightliner, they did a couple of little things, but most of the stuff was locked out by Freightliner. He had to start a case with Freightliner. He got a couple of little things done, like, for example, when you if you try to release a parking brake with the door open, the goddamn horn would honk. Now, how stupid is that? You just want to back up 1 foot to hitch a trailer up and you have the door open and your horn starts honking. So anyway, some little things like that he was able to turn off on that first trip in there, but the rest of the stuff was locked out by Freightliner. So we got to start a case with Freightliner. So that was $200 on the first trip. The second trip to Freightliner was about $300, and they started a case with Freightliner. Freightliner sent them an update for the ECM. Not only did the update not do what it was supposed to do, it undid everything they'd already figured out how to do. It just completely blew it. So, okay, we'll have to start a detailed case with Freightliner. I have to elevate it with Freightliner. So I made another appointment. Got in there, and the dealer gave Freightliner about a list of half a dozen different things that they wanted turned on, and Freightliner maybe turned one thing on and said, no, the rest of it isn't even available. Can't do it. So there was another $500. So my question to you, Leroy, after spending $1,000 at a Freightliner dealer for 3 trips, can any of that crap be turned on by you? Or is that locked out in the bowels of Freightliner and unavailable to anybody in the world?
Well, I don't know unless we get hooked up.
Okay. Well, it's simple things like, for example, when I first got the truck, it only had economy shift mode, and it should have had economy, performance, and manual, and economy was the only one it had. For another example is that I should be able to adjust some parameters on the E-Coast. They're locked out. The only parameter I have, it says screen 1 of 3, but I've only got one option on there, and that's to adjust the following distance. There's no adjustment on the E-Coast. Another example is gauges. I should have a number of gauges available to me in the dash readout, and the only one I have available is engine oil temperature. No boost, no pyrometer, no transmission oil temperature, no rear end, nothing. And it's all supposed to be available. So you won't know till you hook up as to whether you can turn any of that crap back on.
Yeah, that's kind of still learning about the new stuff and all these new features and whether you can or can't be. But I mean, typically we're not locked out of anything. So if it is there and available in the file, then we should be able to turn it on.
But if it's not there and available in the file, then, which I think that's what I'm understanding from there, it's not even in the file.
Then I would have to find like a TCM file that has those features engaged, or enabled, I should say.
Okay. And that's something you can do.
Potentially, yeah. Like I said, that's a little bit of a new request, so I'd have to figure it out.
Okay. Well, it reminds me of an old neighbor I had. You know, if time and money were no object, I think I could fix about anything, and that's kind of where probably if I give you enough time and money, you'd probably fix it.
There you go.
That's how it usually goes.
All right. Well, I'm a little frustrated after spending 3 trips and $1,000 at the dealer that they still haven't been able to figure it out.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah.
I just want to warn you. Be careful. Don't let this eat into your nut butter budget.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, you got to watch that.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's still getting up and down the road hauling freight, but there's just so goddamn many little things in there that I want to be able to adjust. I mean, that E-Coast parameter is just driving me nuts, and there's no way to adjust them. It's just little things like that it just drives me nuts. Not being able to see a boost in pyrometer, whether they're good or bad, I just got to see them, and they're not even available to see. So just a lot of things in there that I thought would be a simple turn on, and obviously it's not. Just the dealer dealer doesn't even have access to turn them on. So, well, I'm going to give him one more shot. I've got the service manager supposed to be trying to get hold of somebody in the bowels of Freightliner to try to pull out some sort of a rabbit out of their hat and get this crap turned on, but I'm a little frustrated right now. That's all I got.
All right.
I understand the frustration on the new stuff.
I get it. I agree. Phone lines are all filled back up again. Let's go to Nebraska. Kent, what's on your mind?
Yes, I got a 19 Western Star with a GHG 17 emissions, and I keep getting SCR efficiency codes. I've replaced the dosing unit, both NOx sensors, and when I do an efficiency test on it, it's perfect. Completes the test, 98 to 99% efficient. Have about 400 to 440 parts per million coming in, and it will range between 3 and 7 parts coming out. Lights go out, I drive it a day, I got an SCR efficiency code again.
The first thing that comes to my mind is you might have some sort of the long-term trim for that might need to be, you might have to do a few back-to-back SCR efficiency tests
well,
to get that trimmed.
Well, that LARP is showing 1.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about then.
Yep. And all the dealers are telling me I need a 1 box, but I have trouble spending that kind of money when I'm watching it on the computer. It's converting NOx as efficient as possible.
Yeah, it might be some sort of temperature related thing. You know, SCRs work better at higher temperatures versus lower temperatures. So it might work perfect under regen conditions or under the test condition, but under sort of lighter loads or something like that, it might not work as well. So that's the
All
other
right.
thing that comes
And
to mind.
what could cause low temperature, I guess?
Just you're just not driving at full load, you know. If you're going down the road
Okay.
and your pyro's only, 600 degrees, it's really not enough to decompose soot. So, or I should say, for the SCR to convert that well.
All right, because I did notice when I put in the new outlet knock sensor, it took it a really long time to start reading. I actually had to do a regen first to get it to start reading, and then I could do the efficiency test.
Yeah, it takes a while for that outlet one to warm up, that's for sure.
All right, well, I'll try some temperature sensors too and see if that does anything.
Do you notice that the light comes on when you're like kind of cruising, or when does the light come on?
I work on it. It works a day. I shut it off overnight. I take off in the morning, and about a half hour in, it comes on.
Yeah. Do you happen to have? Well, you obviously have the laptop. I mean, you could.
I borrow one from a buddy, but.
Yeah. I mean, if you could borrow it for, I don't know if you know this or not, but like DDL8 records the entire session as soon as you open it. So you could have an instance where you think it's going to do it. Just set the laptop aside. You don't even have to watch. Go for a drive, and then when it kicks on, just shut or stop DDL8. Like disconnect it. Like don't close it. Just disconnect it from the truck, and then it should save that session in a log file, and you can go back and watch the log file, and it records everything all at once, so that you can go back and watch the efficiency when it drops, or that might give you a better clue what's going on when it's actually having an issue.
All right. All right. And what about gaskets? If I have any leaking gaskets, would that cause temperature loss?
Yeah, but that just depends how bad the leak is. So.
Yeah, no visible ones, but I was thinking about trying that next too.
Yeah, I would see what it's doing first before you go to buying anything. So.
All right, appreciate it.
All right, thanks for the call.
Yeah, not a problem.
Let's go to Oregon. Darren, welcome.
Yep. Yes, good morning, Kevin. Good morning, gentlemen from Pittsburgh Power. Kevin, as you know, I'm ready to start buying a truck, and I just had a couple of questions for the gentleman at Pittsburgh Power.
Okay.
First question is regarding max mileage. First, I want to mention I agree with Bruce. Says when you get a used truck, you should get it in and get it looked at. Don't wait a few months to do all the little things. So I'll be getting it down there for the Hawkeye report and a whole bunch of other things. But the question regarding Flashpoint is, or two of them I got there. The first one is, at what kind of temperatures do you really need to be going to the winterized Flashpoint?
Well, I think you mean the max mileage, not the Flashpoint.
Yeah, I meant the max mileage. Sorry, I got confused there. Yeah, the max mileage. Thank you for that.
We actually stopped the winter version of it for right now. We offer the cold snap, which comes in a 16-ounce bottle, and it'll treat to, I believe it's up to 200 gallons per bottle. We are going to come out with a new and improved version, hopefully next year, of the max mileage. We're just not there right now.
You're working on it in your basement, right?
I am. My Play-Doh chemistry set. Yeah, we're going to have a new and improved version out next year for you.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask if I could just go with something like cold snap and just add it when I need it. But again, what temperatures would the temperatures be that I would want to add it out?
It depends on the fuel. You know, there's different ratings of fuel, but if you are like North Dakota, Canada, like up along the border there, most of their fuels are already rated for, what is it, like, I want to say like 5 to 15 degrees above. But the cold snap will actually lower it down. It'll protect you. Let me pull up the tech paper here. I want to say it'll protect you for about 15 to 20 degrees below. Let me look here real fast. Yeah, protects to 15 below when you add 8 ounces per 100 gallons. It'll protect at 25 below when you add 16 ounces per 100 gallons. So you can mix it 2 different ways. But yeah, that's kind of like the direction we were going, because we were having a lot of guys saying, I wish I could just use something like this because I run all over. I may fill up in Atlanta in 1 week, and I may fill up in North Dakota the next week. So it's kind of nice that you can just add this as you need it.
Yes, I can see. You fill up in Atlanta where they don't have anything in there, and you're driving up to North Dakota or something, and you're going to need something by the time you get there, mixed in the tank.
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other question about max mileage is, like, once I get my used truck, I want to be bringing it down to Pittsburgh Power to go through it with Diesel Force and DPF. And I'm wondering, would you recommend putting in max mileage right away, or would that process start moving a lot of the soot into the DPF, and I might cause derated because of that plugging up on the way over there?
It wouldn't cause it that fast unless it was like on the verge of a major failure already, which at that point, I don't think it's going to matter. It's not going to loosen up all that stuff right off the bat. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to go through there and residually clean out. But yeah, we would recommend you start running a catalyst right away. And then when you get in here, we can do a diesel force cleaning, which will get rid of all that excessive carbon that's in the engine. And then we can do a DPF alternative cleaning on the filters and even the DOC, depending on what kind of truck you're getting. We can give it a full, thorough cleaning on it.
Yeah. Okay. So that I start the max mileage right away, and it shouldn't be no problem plugging anything up within 2,000-3,000 miles, or whatever it takes me to get there. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. The other question is on tunes. When I was young, tunes were plugs, points. Checking out the cap and doing a timing light. What is a tune now on these new semis, or even like a 2021 DD15, if it would be something? That's an example. What actually goes on in something like that?
It's I don't want to say it's the same, because it's not, but and I can relate to what you're saying, because I still build a lot of carbureted engines. I still build Holley-based carbureted engines, and I have a lot of fun with them. And when I was in high school, I used to carry a matchbook and a pair of points, because if I had the key on, I burnt the points out. I know I could set it to 15,000 because that was the thickness of a matchbook. So a lot of those things are still, I can relate to. There's a lot of still the same theory, but what we're doing now is we're making high performance and efficiency through the programming, because with a computer controlled engine, there is no more pulling out the timing gun, setting your points, adjusting the timing, advance or retard, or jet stuff like that. It's all done from sensors, and there's a lot of electronics on these engines to make them so efficient and so much better. In all honesty, you have how many different sensors reading over this engine, every parameter, the air fuel ratios, the temperatures, the pressures, and all that information gets relayed back to the ECM. The ECM makes calculated formulas and then spits out information to the injectors or the timing. It makes all that adjustments for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask for a little bit more. And we are going to take the fueling and the timing tables, map them, and then mesh them overlay, I guess you could call it, to make sure that it's the most efficient and economical program you can get. So we're actually refining what the big three actually make, because when you are a truck manufacturer, you're building a truck for everybody. You have the owner operators, you have the leased on drivers, you have just the hourly driver. You have a whole broad spectrum. So you need to make like a bulletproof truck and then back it down about 2 notches. We're just giving it a little bit more, and we're putting our version on it too. Like Leroy and the guys back there, they're all gearheads. We do this stuff. We just don't do it in diesel. We do it in all different ways. A lot of us do after hour sports, with cars, motorcycles, whatever, any kind of motor sports. So we have that kind of DNA kind of interwoven, and we carry that over to like what we're doing with the tuning on these things to give them a lot more efficiency, but also a little bit better running. Through horsepower and torque, you can gain better fuel mileage, but you have to drive it responsibly. But that's basically in a nutshell what we're doing. We are doing like a really good tune-up. Like in the old cars, we would change cylinder heads, camshafts, compression ratio with the piston change. We're basically doing the same theory, just by electronic manipulation is what we're doing now.
Okay. Yeah. Just one other question I thought of. I'm not quite sure I understand the difference between a balancer and a dampener, and how do you know when they need to be changed?
Okay, so a crankshaft dampener looks like a 45-pound dumbbell weight on the front of the engine. Every engine out there came with one from the factory. And the job of the crankshaft dampener is to take the kinetic energy off of the crankshaft. When that air-fuel ratio actually ignites inside the combustion chamber, it explodes. And when that explosion happens, there's kinetic energy that is sent down through the face of the piston, down through the rod, and it shocks the crankshaft. It jars it. But that's in turn what pushes the next piston up. As one goes down, another one goes up. Yeah. So when we get into this kind of level of controlled explosions, there needs to be some kind of a shock absorber or dampening effect, is where it got its name, with a crankshaft dampener. This absorbs that kinetic energy so that you don't break a crankshaft. Now, like I said, every engine came with one, and none of them came with the mercury-filled balancing ring. But there's two different energies that the crankshaft needs to displace. There is the explosion, the kinetic energy, which I just described, but there's also a torsional load, like a twisting or wringing out a wet towel effect on the crankshaft, because there's how many hundreds of pounds just slinging around on there. So what the mercury-filled balancing ring is it kind of looks like a pizza pan. It's a flat piece of steel with a tube ring around the outside edge. And that tube ring is filled with liquid mercury. And what that does is it takes the torsional load off the crankshaft and helps fine-tune the crankshaft dampener. Now, we can try to put them on most engines. Some engines you literally cannot put a mercury-filled balancing ring on, and a DD15 is one of them, because they use their front crankshaft dampener as their drive pulley for the serpentine belt system. So depending on what engine you have, we may or may not be able to add a balancing ring.
So Darren, the thing here is the damper is factory, the balancer is aftermarket.
That I never knew. That I kind of understood that when you said it doesn't go on the DD15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and how do you know when?
One exception we never used to have to deal with, the Volvo does not have an external damper. So I would assume the Mac doesn't either, right? I never thought about it, but I just did.
I would imagine, yeah.
They're basically the same design. So those are, now they have some sort of an internal damper, right? I should get an exploded view of one of those engines so I can understand this. Does anybody know?
Yeah.
I honestly don't offhand.
Yeah, I wonder how
Which engine is this?
The Volvo does not have an external damper. So, and I would assume then the Mac doesn't either. But is it internal? And I think Joel explained this to me once. I should remember this. Why that this one does not need to be replaced for some reason. My thought was, well, if it's internal, but it's the same idea and the same mechanism that it's working on, it should be replaced too. But I don't think it needs to be for some reason. I think I'm gonna get an exploded view of the engine and learn this once and for all.
Okay.
Joel was texting me early.
Basically, the torsional damper takes torsional twisting out of the crankshaft, out of the accessory drive shaft, the
Hey, Bruce.
Input shaft
Bruce,
to the transmission.
I don't mean to interrupt. Well, I guess I do mean to interrupt you, because I want to go back to this, because I was confused during this call. And I didn't want to step in because I couldn't think through it. This is another one of those things where I've got to get my head around this better. Weren't you guys saying that the steps, when he went from a 308 to the 390, the steps between the gears got smaller? It's the opposite.
Yes.
It's the opposite.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. Well, That's why I didn't jump in, because I think it is the opposite, but I don't know how to explain it.
When you go from a 355 to a 264, you stay in the gear longer. So sometimes your rate of acceleration is actually faster because you're not shifting as much.
We might be talking about two different things. Staying in the gear longer is not the same as the step in between the gears being different. Those are two different issues. And I wish I knew how to.
The lower the gear ratio, the closer the gears are between shifts.
Lower meaning a higher number. We're gonna confuse everybody if we're not careful about that.
Like a 411 or 456 versus a 308.
Okay, so this was explained to me the exact opposite, but I don't understand, and this is why I didn't bring it up before, because I didn't want to have to try to explain it, because I knew I couldn't, but in my head, I thought, I think we've got this backwards. So Joel texted me this, so I'm hoping he's still listening. Joel, if you can, call. You're much better at it, or give me a good way to explain this so we can figure this out, because I want to make sure this is another one. I want to understand. I thought I did, and during that call, I thought, man, do I have this backwards? I thought it was the other way. So we'll see. I won't say anything until I can explain it better. So I'll either get Joel to come on and explain it, or if he can send me something, I'll try. And if not, I'll get this figured out before next week, and we'll talk about it then.
So let's make it simple. Eric, you take a Mustang with a 4-speed manual, fourth gear being 1-to-1. You got a 456 gear, or you got a 308. Your rate of acceleration naturally is going to be much quicker with the 456. You're going to be shifting faster with the 456 because you're accelerating quicker, but the RPM drop in the transmission between shifts is less with the 456 than the 308. You agree?
Before you answer that, let me give Joel did put somewhat of an answer. He said the gear step is a percentage of rear axle ratio. So would that be right? A smaller ratio. Percentage of that smaller ratio would have to be smaller than a percentage of a bigger ratio, right? I should have paid more attention. I think we've got Joel in. I'm going to let him explain it because he can do this way better than I can. I should have paid more attention to math class, because now I'm confused about the ratio and the percentage. Joel, is that you? Joel? Joel? Let me check with Angie and see if that
He's a little shy.
Whatever this call is, I'm going to put it back in the queue. Angie, can you grab that? And Angie's in the screening room with somebody else. Oh, Matt's here. Where did Joel go? Put Joel back in the... I think we might have lost Joel's call. So let's bring Matt in. Matt may know how to describe this better than I can too. Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, Joel can probably do it better than me. So the shifts in the transmission are based on a percentage. That percentage is of the RPM. So if you were shifting at 1500 RPM, that is, so let's see, I think 27% is a common step in a transmission. 1500 RPM at 27%, you're changing by 405 RPM. Where it changes is what we call a downsped engine, a lower RPM. So if you were only shifting at 1000 RPM, you're only dropping 200.
Okay. Now you brought in a calculation.
270 RPM.
You brought in a calculation that I even understand less. So I'm going to add Joel to the conversation because we've got him back and we can all try to figure this out. Joel, we have you this time?
Yeah, I think so.
There you are. All right. Help us out here.
So what we're talking about is it is either, like Matt said, you can look at it as a percentage of the RPM or a percentage of the rear axle ratio. Either way will work. So when you get more aggressively downsped, the lower or the smaller the number is, like a 216 or a 195 axle ratio, even though the step in the transmission remains the same, it is a percentage of that step. So you look at a rear axle ratio of 195 or 216, the RPM drop is always going to be smaller than like a 308 or a 355, as long as you got that same step in the transmission. So if he's going from a 308 to a 390, the 390 is going to give him a bigger RPM drop, but he's starting at a higher RPM. So it may or may not work for him. Like on that C12 CAD, it doesn't make a whole lot of horsepower at low RPM. So that higher or that more traditional rear axle ratio will probably work all right for him. What he's describing to me, because I tried to run the C12 downsped for a lot of years, and it just was kind of lifeless at low RPM, like he was describing. So it's always a percentage of the rear axle ratio or the RPM that you're cruising at when you make the shift. And Matt was exactly right. It's about 450 at 1500, and at 1000 it's 270 with the same gear step in the transmission.
That you said it. I wish I could explain it that way. That was the understanding, and I didn't want to get into it in that call because I knew I wasn't going to be able to explain it. So, thank you. Now,
it's confusing. I mean, it's hard to get your mind around sometimes. But the step in the transmission is the same; it stays the same. But the RPM drop varies depending upon the rear axle ratio.
That makes sense.
So you always have to kind of figure that into the equation.
Right. That makes sense to me. Now, this should be something we should just be able to prove with two trucks going down the road right now, right? If we had different, couldn't we?
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Right.
I mean, this is just math. I mean, it is what it is. It's simple math. There's no variation between truck brands or engines. This is simply gearing math.
It's just a calculation.
You take a whatever overdrive ratio you have, and then you go back to direct drive, whatever that step percentage is. Like on a Volvo, it's around a 20% step. And this is kind of why with the automated manuals, when we were running more traditional gear ratios, everybody kind of bitched about the RPM drop between direct drive and overdrive, right?
Right.
So now that we're really pushing the limits on downsped gearing, we have almost the identical RPM drop that the close ratio manuals had when we run a 2.16, almost identical RPM drop.
Even though
speeding,
I want to go back to,
you have to keep that in mind.
I want to go back to what you're saying right now. You're saying even with, because is that you're describing two transmissions now that have different ratio, different steps between, right?
The step is irrelevant.
Right.
I don't care if
right. That's what I was trying to get to. Right.
Or a 28% step.
Right.
It still applies.
That's what I was trying to get to. Yeah.
Yep. It still applies regardless of the step in the transmission. It is a percentage of the rear axle ratio or of the current RPM that you're running at. You can do the math either way, but that's how that works. That's a moving target. And when a lot of times when guys want to down speed a truck with a manual transmission that has close steps to begin with, and then you put like a 216 rear axle ratio in it, then there's just so little RPM drop between the gears, it's kind of pointless.
Got it. Anybody have any questions about that, or want more clarification on that, or dispute it? Either one.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the math. There's,
Yeah, right.
It is what it is. There's not a lot you can do. It's just the way that it works out mathematically.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that kind of seems to me like that's either got to be right. Somebody's either going to bring us another calculation and say, no, you're wrong, and here's why, or I'm going to have to believe this one because logically right now in my mind, it's making sense.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. And this was always sort of the challenges with a manual transmission and trying to downspeed a truck, is that the steps the steps stay the same. The RPM gets smaller and smaller between the gears, and then the driver is constantly having to
shift.
You're shifting
Yep.
more, and
Yep.
that was always the problem with a downsped a downsped powertrain with a manual transmission. Your shifting goes up, and guys didn't like that.
Got it. Anybody have any questions for
manual,
Joel about that? Go ahead, Matt.
A lot of people in a manual transmission, people are shifting more on emotion and feeling and, the sound of the engine. So they're shifting at higher RPMs than a computer will do when it's doing it based just on the math formula. So there's a wild difference between
you know what,
manual and auto shift.
This would have helped me when I was doing all the fuel mileage testing and pay. I used to try to nail down what the drop was between gears, and I was always confused because it never seemed consistent. And I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. It's got to be. In my mind, I thought it has to be consistent. And remember, we didn't have digital readout. You're trying to use a tack that isn't all that accurate anyway. But I kept looking at it going, why does this not seem consistent? It should be exactly the same every time I shift. But it's not, because it depends on what RPM you started from. Now that makes sense to me.
Sure. And you always have to just keep that in mind, that it is always a percentage.
So wait a minute.
Technically a percentage of the rear axle ratio that step in the transmission is.
Let me ask this to see if I'm thinking about this right. There are actually two variables that are always in play: the RPM you started from and the rear axle ratio. Not or, it's and, right?
No, it's or.
Well, wait, let me
your rear axle ratio is going to dictate, where that RPM is going to be at any given speed.
Well, no, let me ask you a question though. Let's say I've got a 2.16. Doesn't matter what the ratio is. We're just going to identify we have a rear end ratio. If I'm going to test this and I make a shift at 1200 RPM and then at 1500 RPM, I'm going to come out with two different numbers, right?
No, you're going to come out with the same amount of drop, because it's technically it's based on the rear axle ratio.
That's
where that's going to hit. You're just simply revving it up further. So what Matt is saying is he's basing it on where would this be at a particular speed with this rear axle ratio. For example, you're at 1500 RPM.
Okay. So again, I'm not arguing. I'm trying to get this straight in my head. If
what I'll do, I will put together a chart for you.
Okay.
And then we can post it, and then it'll make it much clearer, I think. Instead of trying to walk through all this math in our head,
right?
Especially while I'm driving.
Yeah.
We'll put it together, and I'll get you a very clear, concise breakdown of how that works. It's always been described to me as that step is a percentage of the rear axle ratio, and that gives you consistency regardless of the actual RPM.
Okay, so I am still a little confused, and I'll wait for the chart because a lot of times visuals really help me with this. So I'm going to wait on that because I'm still little confused.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to understand a lot of times.
Yeah, charts help.
Yeah. I could probably sometime today try that too. I think if we stick with a solid RPM and just run two different charts with different rear end ratios.
So that, Matt, that's
1500.
That's kind of what I was
RPM
trying to get to. is the way this was all just described and I understood it, there are two variables at play every time we calculate this, but maybe not. I thought that if you calculate at a different RPM, you're going to get a different answer. If you change the rear end ratio and calculate, you're going to get a different answer. But if that's the case,
Correct.
then it is a and, not an or. I mean, every time we calculate it at different RPMs with the same gear ratio, we're going to get a different answer. And every time we calculate with different rear end ratios at the same RPM, we're also going to get a different answer. So both variables affect every time we calculate this. That's the way I'm understanding it. But if that's not correct, then I need to figure out why it's not correct.
Yeah, I will get with Dwayne as well, and
Okay.
he does a lot of the tractive effort calculations. But he'll know this,
Good.
you know, instinctively. He'll know exactly how to explain this. So I will get it from him, and then get it to you, and then you can share it.
Any chance you could get him to come on the show with us Friday?
I'll give it a shot.
See if you could. Be fun to hear it from him.
Yeah. Dwayne's a good guy.
Yeah, he really is.
Sure.
That's the guy that gave me the class on the engine architecture, right?
Correct. Yes.
Good. Yeah,
Yep.
he was good. Really good. All right, Joel, we'll let you get back to driving. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. All right. Any final thoughts on that?
Not on that, but I've got one other thing I could add.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the beginning, you were talking about just general maintenance, yearly or semi-annual inspections.
Yeah.
Something I just learned this last year. I had a wheel seal and a drive axle go out, and the little bitty Allen screw plug on the hub to drain the oil out or add oil to make sure you're getting it on the outside of the bearings. The newer ones, anyway, on the newer cutoff I put on, is magnetic. So just pulling that plug out, you'll know if you've had any bearing wear. Because there'll be metal and that's what I had. I had metal shavings on there, and pulled the bearings apart, and it took a long time to find them, but there were a couple spots on the bearings that were getting bad, but
interesting.
It was obvious the shavings on that plug.
Hey, I just realized Bruce isn't here. I know he said earlier he had to drop off and I wasn't paying attention. Eric, when we go back to Bruce asked you the question about this in a car, and I was reading Joel's stuff and trying to think that through, so I missed it. After hearing Joel's explanation, how does that apply to, because I didn't even really hear your answer either, but does this change anything you were just thinking about?
No, what Joel said was right. It's a percentage drop based on the RPM you're at. When you're shifting a car at 8,500, 9,000 RPMs, your drop is much, much higher because your RPM band is much, much higher.
Right.
So if I was shifting a car at say 15 or 1600, my drop would be much, much less. So the percentage of drop does dictate off of the RPM you're at. But I think what Bruce was trying to say is if you run a car with a 456 gear ratio versus a 355, you will accelerate faster, and the drop between the gear, or the RPM drop between the gears, is less because of the gear ratio. It's what they said was right, but car relations are a little bit different in this application because of the RPM band. We're only talking 1,000 to
one of the things
15, 1600 RPM.
And again, I'm kind of qualifying everything I say because I don't know. I'm trying to understand. If that's the case, and that's where Bruce was maybe we're talking about two different things. What I'd like to do then, set aside the RPM. Let's just not talk about that for a second. Let's talk about only.
Let me
go ahead, Matt.
Let me go back to RPM and say it in a different way.
Okay.
This has changed over the years as we're lowering RPM. So if we go back to a mechanical engine, and let's just use some round numbers, let's go to a 20% drop because the math gets easier. an old mechanical engine running at 2,000 RPM before you shift,
Right.
20% is
400.
400 RPM, right?
Right.
Now a new modern engine is, the Volvo is all the way down to 1,000.
Right.
That's only 200 RPM.
Correct. So, and I get that.
Same shift, but
I get that, and I think we're all in agreement on that, because Eric just said same thing. He said it the same way based on cars, different numbers, but the math was the same. Here's what I want to get to, because this was really the crux of this call we were on. Let's throw out the RPM variable. We're always going to calculate this at, let's just say, 1,500 RPMs, just so we're consistent, and some of the math might be easy. We're never going to change the RPM. I want to know, and this is just math, so it's not it can't be different in some, it's just math. If we're always going to calculate at the same RPM and we make a gear ratio change, what is the change that occurs in the drop? That's what I'm trying to get to, because we have one side saying the change in the drop actually got smaller when we went to a lower gear ratio, and we have one side saying, no, the change will get bigger. Throw out the RPM, because that's confusing us. If we calculate this always at the same RPM, which gear change makes your steps smaller? That's what I'm trying to get to. And the way it was described, it is always the higher gear ratio, lower number, that will give you a smaller step at the same RPM. Matt, do I have that right?
I believe this is where we need a chart.
I know that and I want to make sure I understand this. So Eric, do you see what I'm getting at there?
I have time today.
I do, Kevin, and I've actually, again, I've never driven a truck for a living, so I can't speak on that. But in the car industry, when you have a 4-speed manual transmission, your fourth gear is 1-to-1 ratio. If you shift that car with 355 gears, the drop in RPM is more on a 355 than it is like a 456 gear ratio.
At the same
because
RPM.
You're up in the upper RPM with 456. But see, that's where it gets confusing, because it's not the same RPM.
That's
so
why
I think a chart would do all
right.
Good.
That I think we're getting down to why we're and this would explain what Bruce was trying to explain. He was making comparisons, bringing both variables into the equation. If you're starting with this gear ratio, you're going to be shifting at a different RPM, I think is what he's saying. So that's why I tried to get to the point where it's always and it is the RPM and the gear ratio combined that will give you the right formula, not or. I thought to myself, you can't calculate percentages two different ways and say it's the same calculation. It's not. So it's not or. I need to take into account both variables each time. And I think that's why we're giving examples of when we changed a gear ratio and the RPM went in a certain direction, but it would only go in that direction at that RPM. And we're comparing two different RPMs and two different gear ratios. No wonder why we're confused.
Yeah.
So a chart would really help.
I'll put some graphs together here.
That would help
later
a lot.
today, and I'll even email them to you, Eric, so we can all talk about this in the future too.
Guys, I actually
Thanks, Matt.
love these kinds of conversations. Because once I understand these, then it's one more way we can troubleshoot, we can figure things out, we can help people spec better. You know what this reminds me of? Matt, you're going to remember this. The first time somebody called me and they were talking about locking in differentials and how differentials work, and we were so confused about this. Everybody was all over the board. And it was when I was working, was it Volvo or Freightliner? I think it was Freightliner. And I got one of their engineers and I had him come on and explain how differentials actually work. And it was shocking how many people, including myself, did not have a clear understanding of what happens in a differential and what happens in a power divider, which is essentially just another differential. But we argued this back and forth over and over, and everybody had their analogies. No, I got stuck and I was able to do this, so that proves this. Most of us were wrong about how differentials worked.
Yeah, because the old theory, 60% of the power goes to the rear axle.
Right.
Well, a differential can't choose a percentage.
Correct.
Of power.
Right. It
goes
changes
to
constantly. Yeah.
Yep,
And
the path of least resistance is where the power goes.
That's the key that would help you understand why, when you get stuck in the snow, the only wheel turning is the one that's not on the ground. And you're stuck. Because the power follows the path of least resistance. Any tire that has traction has resistance, and the power is going to go to the tire that has no resistance. And that works for the each axle, differential, and the power divider can act the same way until we lock it in, or we could have a locking differential. So we had these same kind of arguments for weeks back then. And I finally got the engineer on here. They explained it to us. Once they did, it made sense in my mind. We've never argued about it again. So I hope we can come up with the same thing on this one. But I like this kind of stuff. This is when I learned.
Nope.
All right, Matt, thanks.
Well, me too, because, yep.
All right.
Later.
Good talking to you. We got a bunch of phone calls again, so we got about a half hour. Let's try to wrap these up. In fact, I think I'm going to turn off the phones. Let's go to BC. Lucas, welcome. Oh, no, hold on. I'm sorry. Richard in Missouri.
Yeah.
I did it again.
There you go again.
I know.
Hey, 2 weeks ago, I called to ask about a way to air up my steer tires and get about 120 PSI out of them. And somebody mentioned a Milwaukee air compressor. Well, I bought the Milwaukee air compressor, got it in last week, got home, and I used it last week and today, and that thing works miracles. It pumps up to 100, actually I'll go up to 150 PSI if you need it to.
Yeah, they're awesome. I have one for the race car, and I absolutely love it.
Yep. All right, that's all I needed to know. Just to let y'all know that it works good.
All right, excellent. Thanks
Good
for the
deal.
call. Let's, now we can go to BC. Lucas, welcome.
Good morning, fellas.
What's on your mind today?
Just to, well, after listening to all that math, I'm trying to think another factor into that when you're in BC or Alberta, which I think he was, is the speed you lose while shifting on a 9% grade.
Oh, hey, you stop that. Talk about
I'm not gonna go any further.
Holy
But if
cow.
you put that in charge,
Yeah.
screw everything up.
Yeah, that will really screw us all up. Now we have to. Now
I
we
got
would.
an issue with
If we even wanted to attempt to calculate this, we would have to have so many variables: the rolling resistance of the whole vehicle, the incline, the weight, all kinds of crazy stuff. So just stop it.
Okay, I'll
All
jump
right.
to that then.
All right. Go ahead.
I got a 2016 International with an ISX. I got this issue. So it starts perfectly fine in the morning. It can be cold. You know, it was -10 the other day. I started, fired right up, no problem. But if I run the truck for a while, and then it's got an automatic 5-minute shutdown timer. So sometimes, you know, I was switching a trailer and walk away, get sidetracked, it shuts off. And when I go to start it again, it has a hard time starting. So it's just like a slow cranking, almost like the batteries are toast kind of thing. But the batteries are good. They're new. They've been load tested. I've checked all the terminal connections on the battery side. But I'm wondering if there's anything that would affect that, like being warm. So if I let it sit for an hour and cool off, it starts no problem.
Does the starter turn over at all when it's warm?
Yeah, it turns over. It's just a slow crank. Like it'll take 8 or 9 seconds for it to finally fire up. Whereas if it's cold, it starts in 2 seconds like normal.
Is the starter itself, though, is it cranking at the same RPM, or is it slower to crank when it's hot?
It's cranking slower, I think.
Okay. It sounds like the solenoid is probably going bad on the starter itself. Whenever
Okay.
they get old or wore out, they'll get hot. That's when you see guys reach underneath there with a hammer and tapping on them because the contacts
Yeah.
are sticking. So you probably just need a new starter solenoid. Now, I don't know about your starter if you can actually change just the solenoid. Most of them you can. Some of them I've seen you cannot, though. They're actually like incorporated into the housing. So depends on which one you have.
Okay.
But depending on how old it is, most guys just change the starter anyway.
Yeah. All right. That's I should probably go find one and at least have it sitting on the shelf for me here, or in the bunk here.
Yep.
Cool.
All
Appreciate
right.
your help there.
You're welcome. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Texas. Robert, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I've got a 97 Peterbilt 379. Talk about gear ratios like y'all talking about made me think about it, but I've got 370 gears on this thing with an 18 speed, and I'm thinking about maybe going changing the differentials. There's 2 million miles on them, and I've had to weld up the housings a few times, so that's why I thought about just taking the whole things out and just getting a. And I was wondering what to go with if I wanted to run in direct, like a 264, or y'all said something about a 308 wouldn't mess with it or something. So I don't know.
So what engine and what year?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a 97 model with a Cat 5EK.
Okay. So
3406E.
yeah, this is kind of that generation that we were talking about a lot. Electronic, but pre-emission, kind of that sweet spot. These are the trucks we tried to hold on to for a long time. For the most part, in this setup, if you're going to change rear end ratios, the goal on this one at this point is to get to be able to run in direct as much as we can, because that 18 speed is say horribly, you're going to lose about 3% when you start turning, and churning all the oil in overdrive gears. So this is why we used to focus on getting to direct. And this is also why we don't have to focus on that anymore, because we now have transmissions that aren't inefficient in overdrive. So it gives us more flexibility. But for years and years, 264 was the gear here. I mean, we've had really good luck with 264s here. Your 18th gear will become, I say that gear is really only useful if the cops are chasing you and you don't want to stop.
Yeah, well, it's got the Pittsburgh exhaust and turbo, and they've tuned it and everything.
Yeah,
I don't know. Just the housings are needed to be welded. I just figured I'd change the whole thing.
You'll really like 264s on this.
264.
Most of
is about their muffler.
What you're going to find is a lot of your RPMs and shift point are going to be the same as they are right now. You're just going to move down a gear to get almost the same effect you used to get. This allows you to stay in direct at your cruise speed more often. I guess I should have asked what your cruise speed is. If it's too fast.
Well, normally 65 to 70.
Oh,
I mean,
you're okay. Yeah, you're
if
okay.
I need to go fast, I'll go fast. But I mean,
yeah, and that's another thing we should always remember. We want to spec a truck gear-wise, everything, efficiency-wise. We want it to be efficient in the way we operate it most of the time. The majority of the time, where and how are we operating, what weight, what terrain, what speed. That's where we want to spec it for. That doesn't mean that you can't go 75 miles an hour if you need to. You go 75, your RPMs are going to be higher than we want them. You're going to be a little less efficient, but that's okay. I mean, this is why, though, now we say with the new transmission, the Volvo 14-speed I-Shift for sure, with those low creeper gears and the ability to run that engine at such a low RPM, and we can still always run it at a higher RPM, it gives us that flexibility, even on heavy haul, to go down to higher gear ratios and have that setup where we have 3 highway gears to run. That is just about as versatile as we're ever going to get.
Okay. Well, that's what I was thinking. I don't run real heavy. Normally, I'm only 60,000 pounds when I'm loaded. So
Yeah,
with a
you
step
two
down, so
two
I'm usually really light.
64, kind of that sweet spot gear for those trucks from that era.
Is there certain year models that'll work? I went to Recognize and looked, but I hadn't seen one that looked like the same type of rear end that fits on this old Peterbilt one here.
That I don't know. I'm not real good at all the different rear end setups and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just as long as they bolt up. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I sure appreciate it. I've just put new exhaust and I run it to straights. I don't like them. And I know Pittsburgh Power's got like a muffler or something, maybe they call it.
Yeah, it's a high flow.
Would it help to put that on or just?
Yeah, it does help.
Because it's better than just running it straight or
Well, it's quieter.
Just to have a little bit of back pressure or no?
No,
Well, yeah, I
but
don't like the noise. That's the reason I don't like it.
let's clear something up. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong here. I go back to two-stroke motorcycle racing days when we used to build custom exhaust pipes because the expansion chamber on a two-stroke was so important. You wanted certain amounts of back pressure at certain times. From my understanding on a diesel engine, there's no purpose of ever having back pressure, and the lower our back pressure is, the more efficient we are. Eric, am I on track with that?
Sort of. It does require some back pressure, but the amount of back pressure that's required is actually made in the exhaust manifold. So theoretically, the turbo and everything else after it is not really needed as far as the back pressure goes. But yeah, our mufflers are free-flowing design. On your truck, you would have just two vertical stack mufflers. We offer two options. We offer our Performance Classic and our Performance Sport for the guy that likes to hear his exhaust. Both are going to give you the same flow characteristics as a straight pipe. There's a zero difference there. We've actually had these tested years ago. The only difference is we're going to quiet it down than a straight pipe. So that's why we come out with these. And we sell a lot of these still to this day because a lot of guys just don't want to run straight pipes.
Yeah, I just get tired of the noise. I thought it wouldn't be that bad, but I'm just tired of the noise now.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, I get it.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, well, I sure appreciate it. Thank y'all for taking my call.
All right, thanks for the call. Let's go to Ohio. Philip, welcome.
Yes, sir. Hey, you had a call earlier that had a SCR reading problem on his Cascadia. And I had that same problem back about a year ago. And a new shop diagnosed it as an SCR covering, a DOC covering. And they done a 4-hour regen. And that solved the problem. Somehow it helped my SCR efficiency. Are you still here?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yep. Yeah, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, that solved my problem, was that 4-hour regen, and that SCR efficiency was caused by a DOC covering. If that makes any sense.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. It
So
does.
he might.
That's an odd one. I've never heard of that.
He might try that. It was a 4-hour regen. We did it on a hot day, and we did have some damage due to the heat. It melted the fuel filter in my APU, so a guy should have a fan on them trucks when they're doing them long regens. Because whatever, I had some heat damage afterwards, but whatever. That's what cured my problem.
All right.
And thank you very much.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yep.
All right, let's go to Washington. Cole, welcome.
Hey, guys. Hey, I wanted to weigh in on that gear ratio thing because I was doing some math a while back. And because I remember listening to Joel and you guys talk about the percentage of axle ratio and the fact that when you downspeed a rear axle, you actually get closer steps. But I found that was actually backwards depending on how you think about it. So I think Bruce is right, because when we're driving, we're not too concerned with how much RPM we drop between, say, overdrive and direct. or at least I'm not. What I'm trying to accomplish is running at a certain speed at a certain RPM.
Let me stop you for a second, and it's because I want to try to keep this as clear as possible for everybody. So I'm going to try to keep it as clear as I can for myself. I think one of the places, and this is what I was trying to describe early, we can get into real trouble and confuse all of ourselves and everybody else if we don't first understand the math. And this is why I say this. Math is math. There's no opinions, there's no gray areas, there's no variables. The math is the math. And I want to understand two things. One, I think we already are pretty clear on. When we shift at different RPMs, that is going to affect the drop, the size of the drop. And we're shifting at higher RPM, we're going to have a bigger drop. If we're shifting at a lower RPM, we're going to have a smaller drop. Can we all agree on that so far?
Yeah.
That's math, but hold on. But I also want to take the RPM out of the equation because it's a variable. And now I want to say we're always going to run this calculation. Let's just say 1,000 RPMs. It doesn't matter. We're always going to run it at 1,000 RPMs. So we take away that variable. And if we start testing gear ratios, here's all I want to know. When the gear ratio goes up, what happens to the RPM? It can't be, well, sometimes it does this and that can't be. That's why I want to understand the math first. Then we get into the real world scenario of, yes, but we have to take into account both variables now, because that's when I went back to, it can't be rear end ratio or RPM. It has to be rear end ratio and RPM. And that's when it gets much more complicated to talk about, especially on the air when I'm not looking at a chart. So I want to go back again. We all agree on what happens to the drop or gain when you're only changing RPM. Now I want to get to the place where we all agree, because we have to at some point. It's just math. I want to get to the place where we all agree when you make a gear ratio change, here is the impact on the RPM. On the step, the drop. And I don't think we're there yet.
Right.
I don't think we're in agreement.
And I guess my point was the opposite to that was, as drivers, we don't really care how much the RPM drop is. What we care is our speed. So
wait a minute, Cole.
When Bruce was talking about it.
Hold on. If we go back to today's call, that seemed to be the only thing that caller was concerned about. He said, if I do it like this, my drop is too big. If I do it like this, my drop is too small. So what do? That was his only concern on that call, was the drop.
Oh, and I didn't hear that call. I jumped.
Yeah,
on late,
that's what started all this.
I did.
This guy was,
okay.
And to make it even more confusing, I missed part of the call and didn't realize we were talking about a mechanical engine. So I was way off on what RPMs and gear ratios we should have been talking about. So here's why you are correct, Cole. I understand what you're getting at. In the real world, when we start looking at speccing our trucks or changing our specs, we have to use the more complicated calculations that include both variables. I get that, and you are correct. What I'm saying is, if we want to understand this correctly, we need to all agree on the math first, because once you throw in both variables, you can come up with all kinds of answers. Oh no, I did this and my RPM went down. Well, wait a minute, I did the same thing and my RPM went up. That could happen, because we have to understand
I want to throw
the two different calculations.
Way out there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I want to throw something way out there, because when I started looking at these calculations, I remembered what Joel said, and I said, wait a minute, that's math. It can't be argued. But why is it coming out negative or backwards? And the reason is because when we look at speed, here's what I want to do when I'm speccing a truck. I want to spec a truck that has as many gears as I can get between 55 and 70. Because
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
our speed that we drive
Right.
on a regular basis.
Right.
So when you go down, or when you go a higher gear, like a 2.16, that spread gets larger, not smaller. And when you go
What spread?
up
Hold
in,
hold
or
hold hold on. I didn't understand what you just said. What spread gets bigger?
in speed. So like, let's say, for example, you shift between overdrive and direct, and you drop 200 RPM.
You just threw in another variable
so
we haven't even addressed yet. We weren't addressing speed at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When
Right.
we're looking at this, we have to look at speed, because that's what that's kind of what Bruce was alluding to.
Correct.
Is you go through the gears faster.
This is.
So
I'm not,
because what I've noticed.
I'm
is,
not
like,
arguing,
let's
Cole,
say
but here's
my
what I'm
truck,
going to
for
do.
example.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop you. You are correct. I'm not saying you're not correct. I'm not stopping you because I think you're wrong. I think you're right that the real world calculation of this is what is important to all of us, but we will stay confused and we will fight and argue about what the real world answer is if we don't all agree on the math first. And like we said, it's just math. If you throw out all the variables except the rear end ratio, there is a formula we can use. When you make this change, are the RPMs going to go up or down? Or is the gap, the step, going to go up or down? It's math. It can't be a variable if we eliminate all the other variables. And I just want to get us to that point where we can all describe these things and agree that this is the math. When you throw in the variables of the RPM and the speed, now the math could be all over the board. You could make the same gear ratio change to one truck and have different results because all the variables are in play now. But for me, I can't understand a topic unless I can understand all the root calculations that led to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you're saying. I'm just trying to, for everybody listening, try to say, it more has to do with trying to keep our speed as close as we can. It has very little to do with how much RPM drop in each gear. We don't really care about that. What we care about is, can we cruise at this speed in overdrive? Can we cruise at this speed?
Here
and
again.
What shrinks that speed gap?
Here again, Cole, you are bringing up why I keep talking about how challenging Tuesdays are becoming. Because in the call that started this, we were talking about mechanical engines, and any of us that can go back to those days can relate to this. It was frustrating sometimes trying to shift up a hill with a lot of weight was really tough when you had a big jump. So, and this is who we're talking to. We're talking to a guy on a mechanical engine with 390s. So now you move to today's modern engines with all kinds of power, all kinds of torque, and auto shift transmissions that are shifting so fast it's insane. You're right. The drop today doesn't matter anymore. But unfortunately, on this call, it did matter. And this is the kind of stuff I have to deal with now. When we start talking about boost, but we taught for years, boost is, you might as well consider it a fuel mileage gauge. That's how much of a correlation there is. That's just not true in the modern engines, not at all. There's no correlation between boost and fuel mileage anymore. So all of these things that I said, we have like 3 different generations of technology that we're dealing with. And I have to stop and explain why I gave this answer last week, but it seems like I'm giving a different answer this week. I'm not. We're just talking about a whole different scenario. And this is another case of that. You're right. I don't think about the RPM drop at all. But that was the specific question today. How do I spec this truck to get around this drop that just isn't working?
Right. No, I get that. To the other caller that called in about the older Peterbilt with the 5EK Cat, the 264s will probably be about, depending on his tire size, that's another thing we didn't ask, but if he's got the low pro 22.5, it should be about 1450 at 63 and probably about 1475 at 65. So that should be about right for that engine. And then one other thing before I go is, yes, last week you guys were talking about the Endurant engine, or sorry, the Endurant transmission, and wanting to know the gear ratios.
Yeah.
So all Endurants are all the same. They do
they
not
are?
make. Yes, they are all the same.
Okay, that's good to know.
Except for they have two. They have a 12-speed and an 18-speed. Those are the only two differences.
Okay.
And then they have different torque ratios, but the gears are all the same. So it's always an overdrive.
Okay.
And the 12-speed is always a 0.77, same as Henry's.
Always. I'm going to make a note of this, so I'll start to remember. Always a 0.77. Did you say? 77. Always a 0.77 overdrive. Got it. So I'm trying to get
top three gears. Let me tell you those real quick.
I'm trying to get away from these terms, but I just want to say it because we've always said it this way. This is kind of sort of what we would consider a single overdrive, but we should get away from that whole concept and just start using ratios like you did, 0.77. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, it is a single overdrive in that it has one overdrive gear, but it is closer to the traditional double overdrive.
Exactly.
Because like a 13-speed or an 18-speed was
0.86
and a 0.73.
Right.
And this is closer to the 0.73, but it's kind of in between the two. So on the Endurance, it's going to be 10th gear is going to be 1.3, 11th is 1, and then the 0.77 is 12.
Got it. Okay.
So for almost everybody that's looking for fuel mileage, you're going to look for the gear ratio that is the 2.79 or the 264. Unless you want to drive really slow, and then you can go with the 285 with the caller called in last week, or maybe even lower than that if you want to drive at 55.
You know, one of the trucks that shocked us for fuel economy when we were doing this, I think it was Walmart. There was somebody with a lot of trucks ordered a whole bunch of Series 60s to run in direct with 293s. And we thought when the first time somebody called me with that truck, I said, that is just awful. You're going to struggle with this, except this was also when fuel mileage went through the roof, and we had a group on our website called the 54 Mile an Hour Club. And they ran those trucks, those 293 gears at 54 miles an hour were fantastic for fuel economy.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I was thinking that too. For almost everybody, they're going to want to drive 60 plus, 60 to 65. But for anybody that really truly wants to drive that 55, that 285 gear ratio with the Endurant transmission might just be the best one possible.
It might work really well. Right.
I tagged you in a post on the Trucking Tribe site that gave you all those ratios and gave you the link for Endurance.
Good.
So you can look up all the ratios all together.
I know I've been
absent last week, so you have to find it. So
yeah, I've been absent from the site for a while. Yesterday, I got back in there and answered some questions and got some things cleaned up. And I'm going to attempt. Right after my show every day, I'm going to attempt to get in the website every day, go in and answer my questions. I'd love to post more, but the way that I post now, I'm using X as my news reader now. It's where I get all my information from. There is no good way to take a post that's on X and put it on our site. If I do, people say, "Oh, that made me go to X." I don't want to go to X, but the work I have to do to then I have to record screen videos from X, then I have to copy the text, then I have to go over and post it, and it's just way too much work. So, but I'm working on it. I'm going to try to, after my show every day, I'm going to try to spend as much time as I have that day going in the site, answering some questions. I'll try to figure out a way to post more stuff. So when I go in there today, I'll grab that. I appreciate that.
Well, that's just, I mean, if you want to, I'm pretty sure I tagged you in it, so I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I'll find it. Yeah.
That will give you the website that you can look at that transmission. But all the 12 speeds on the PACCAR side, the Peterbilt or Kenworth are all going to be that ratio. until you get into the 18 speed, and then the ratio changes because it's a true double overdrive. That overdrive is 0.70, pretty aggressive.
Oh, wow.
But
Wow.
all your 12 speeds are going to be the 0.77, which are exactly the same as Henry's, and only 1/100th off from Joel's. So when
Yeah.
we're looking at the top two gears, they're going to be pretty much the same across the board with all modern trucks with an automated manual with the top two gears. The only thing difference is going to be the axle ratio and where the engine should run at.
Well, and the other difference on these, we're missing those creeper gears that allow us to go to higher ratios.
Well, startability you're talking about.
Right. And that
Because
call comes up a
I
lot
listened
now. Because when we start talking about
I
2.16 ratios, Joel's now playing around with 1.95 ratios. Startability, at 264, which was one of our really popular gears, I would say, unless you're doing some crazy heavy hauls, startability is not a problem. We've run the numbers. Even when you're a little off from what the OEM says, we're not too worried about that. But when we start getting into these crazy high ratios, startability is a concern. It's a big concern.
Yeah, and I think like with any truck that anybody's looking at purchasing that is a used truck, we're not looking at those crazy gears because we just don't find trucks with that, especially in the Peterbilt and Kenworth realm. The most aggressive gear you'll find is the 264,
Right.
and they're very common actually.
Yeah, right.
And my 264, unless I'm pointed uphill, it's going to start in second all the time. That's just what it chooses to do. So there isn't a startability at that ratio, I can tell you.
Correct.
But
right.
probably if you switch something out, there could be. But yeah, no, absolutely. I had one other thing, but it wasn't all that important. I know you got to get to some calls. So
Actually, I turned the phones off a little while ago because we're at 11 o'clock. You're the last caller, so go ahead.
Oh, I got the gauge. What the hell is that called now? The
scan gauge.
Gauge from Pittsburgh Power. Help me out.
The
scan
gauge.
No, not the scan gauge. The
boost or pyrometer.
OTR. The OTR scan gauge.
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
God,
okay.
Yes, the OTR gauge, and it's kind of cool because you can watch all your temperatures, your DEF temperatures, and your SCR conversion and stuff like that. And I know that we have said, and it makes logical sense, that as we downspeed, we tend to run hotter in the ignition system.
Correct.
But from what I can tell, from watching my temperatures, that's not true. It should be true, but I think the VGR turbo makes it not true. So I need to test it some more, and I need to get it on some nice flat level ground where I can try different gears and try 900 RPM and then try 1200 RPM and see what gets hotter. But so far, the little bit of testing I've been doing seems to be that the higher RPM always gets hotter than the lower RPM.
That is...
Now I run a PACC-R with the endurance, so maybe it's only with that engine that is an anomaly or
well,
something,
that will not be something that would be completely consistent across the board with different architectures and all kinds of different technologies and engines today. But I would think that the pattern should be consistent. But maybe it's not. It would be really interesting if you get a chance, if you could do any of this in the next couple of days and call us on Friday. Be a great topic to talk about on Friday.
Yeah, because the one thing I have kind of noticed is that when I watch my before turbo temperature, these new trucks have temperature gauges everywhere.
Okay.
If I watch my before turbo temperature, that gets hotter as I go down in the RPM, like it should, like it used to with my old Cat. I transferred over from Cat, so I know everything from the E model Cats.
Right.
That's all I used to own. And so it does exactly what you think it would do. But then when you look downstream, it actually cools down too quickly as it's running downstream. But when you run the RPM up, there's more volume of air to heat everything up, and it tends to run hotter. I think that's what's going on.
You might be right. That makes some logical sense. Huh.
Now, the question would be is on the Volvo, where you're very downsped, that engine is built for downsped, and you're really able to fuel aggressively downsped. When I run 1,000 RPM or 900 RPM, this Paccar is probably not fueling super aggressively because it's trying to be safe. That all might change, but it seems like with the Paccar, and I would probably translate that to the Cummins also.
Right, somewhat.
It may not actually get hotter all the way down in the DPF by the time. So running lower RPM may not always be better for emissions. There's probably going to be a sweet spot. It's not going to always be lower on the RPM curve.
So one of the
I need to test it once I get in Louisiana and some nice flat ground. But I'm in Oregon now. I just crossed. I'm over next to you.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it'll be interesting if you can do some of this and call us on Friday. We could geek out on this. And we have said, and this again comes back to the challenge of doing this show, how much more complicated it's gotten over the years, that we always say, Joel's good at saying this, what we say about this particular platform, the Volvo, aggressively downsped, changes a lot. You can't make these same comparisons. You can't do this to some of the other engines. And maybe it is on these other engines that's not the way it's working in the emissions. And that would be good to know. And then, if we could figure out why that occurs, then that would be really good to know. But I think this is another topic we could probably learn a lot about.
Yeah, I just thought of something. The TC engine, the Volvo, if I'm not mistaken, that is a single geometry turbo.
It is. It's a very simple turbo.
So that would most likely be 100% true on that engine because it's not a VGT.
Right.
When it comes to VGT engines, I don't know if it really matters what RPM you're at because it all depends on what that turbo's spinning at and how aggressively the ECM is fueling.
One of the primary reasons that we can't use boost pressure as a gauge of fuel economy the way we used to is the VGT turbo messes that up.
Right. Yeah, because it can get. I can get up to like 25 psi at 1,000 RPM, which is unheard of.
Yeah. So that's
why we used to do that with the old twin turbo cats, but that was about it.
Well, the twin turbo cats made the whole boost thing more complicated too because it was a totally different calculation. But now it's even it really on the downsped engines, turbo boost is meaningless. Like we may, I don't even know if we can use it as much of a even a troubleshooting tool the way we have in the past. There's a lot of variables there, but
because as your boost goes down, say like you have a leak, then the VGT will just adjust to make up for it, and you'll never know it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's so all of this has become so complicated, and then it's multiplied. Not only are we dealing with wild new technologies we never used to, everybody's technology is proprietary now. So this gets crazy when you start talking about all the different OEMs, and now we're going to throw international back into the mix. This will get really fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
All right, Cole, if there's a chance you could call on Friday, that'd be awesome.
That's why we love the show.
All right. Good stuff. Cole, if you could call on Friday, that'd be great. Eric, Leroy, we're going to wrap this up. Full show today. Anything you guys want to close with?
I got nothing.
All right.
Actually, I do.
Okay.
I'm going to send my math teacher an apology card for not paying attention.
I know. I feel the same way. I feel like I'm struggling with some of this stuff because I'm struggling with the math. Like when you multiply a percentage by a percentage, does it get bigger or smaller? I should have paid attention. I shouldn't have been doing what I
should have applied myself. That's my bad.
Here's my problem. I had in my freshman year in high school, I had algebra right after lunch. Lunch was an open lunch. I usually indulged in things during lunch that did not make concentrating after lunch easy. So I actually ended up dropping out of algebra and taking business math instead. So now you can see why I'm so much better at calculating profit and loss statements than I am gear drops.
Yep.
All right. Leroy, you still awake?
Yeah, kind of.
Do you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
All right.
You beautiful bunch of fuckers.
There you go. That's right. All right. We will see you guys next week. Thanks as always. If you have any questions between now and then, call the team at Pittsburgh Power. We'll see you back here tomorrow for Destination Health. Let me see if I have any announcements I have to make today. I have a whole bunch. CMC registration. I think I'm going to play the commercial right now so I don't have to say it. We've got some sales in the store. We have a new dark chocolate bar. My favorite dark chocolate is now in the store, Creo chocolate. We have Minty Dark. It's one of my favorites. And I don't see any other announcements. I think I have a guest tomorrow on Destination Health, but I'm not sure who it is. We will see you then. Be safe, be profitable, be fit and healthy. Always do the hard work and master the journey.
Attention Tribe! Ready to take charge of your future in the trucking industry? Join us for CMC Live, powered by Let's Truck and Nastic at the Mid-America Trucking Show, March 26th and 27th in Louisville, Kentucky. Led by Kevin Rutherford, CMC Live delivers actionable insights and real-world solutions designed to help you transform your business. From cutting-edge strategies to hands-on advice, this is the event that puts you in the driver's seat of success. Don't miss this life-changing experience. Be there. Be unstoppable. CMC Live, March 26th and 27th at the Mid-America Trucking Show in Louisville, Kentucky. Register now at truckingshow.com.